Good day, my 5 viewers. Before we begin, I just want to say a little something that matters to me. Just for clarity, I don't make any money from these podcasts, and I don't expect to. I have about 5 followers, but I appreciate those 5 people. Thank you. I'm not funded, I'm not sponsored, and I don't have a big audience, obviously. I work alone, my equipment is insufficient, but I will continue to do my best. I have made a commitment to myself to create 52 of these podcasts, one per week every week. We shall see what happens. So, just to be clear, this is actually a very sad podcast I'm making today, and I'll get into it more. But in any case, just so you know, I'm an 80-year-old man sharing a few thoughts while I can, hopefully for another 20. That's probably positive thinking, but hey, why not? Better the glass half full than half empty, right? If we don't have a goal, it kind of makes life pointless. And one thing I want to be clear about, and I have been in 2 or 3 of my podcasts, this is number 5, is that international students are the best. They deserve respect. They are great. And my experience with the international students that are with me are phenomenal. And anyone who has any thoughts about renting a room or a basement to international students, do your due diligence, but don't look for the negative side in everything. These students are really good. In any case, the students who have lived in my home were and are some of the most focused, highly educated, hardworking people I've ever met. They really want to make success. They pay enormous tuition fees. They work incredibly hard. They carry the hopes of their families on their shoulders. And they do this in a new country with a new language barrier. It's not easy. Just for a moment, imagine you and I were going to another country that wasn't English-based and seeing how we negotiate the system. It's not easy, and they're doing great. The students that have been here with me have been here for quite some time. They've been honest, tidy, respectful, kind. They've helped me when I needed help. They've treated me and this home with dignity and respect. They've never been mean or disrespectful due to my age. They're great. So my goal here is simple: to speak positively, to support people, and to offer a bit of clarity in a world that often misunderstands them, referring to international students. If you're listening, even if you're only one of a handful of people, I'm grateful that you're here. Thank you. I know how valuable time is, especially when you get older, you'll realize that. I will try to make each of my podcasts better than the prior one. I will try to acquire better equipment and become more familiar with it. So be a little bit patient. I will do the best I can and try to improve each time.
To glide in this moment, we can't hide. Music's pumping and hearts are racing. Let's keep this party never ending. We're dancing in the stars tonight, higher than the moon. Taking flight, feel the rhythm, feel the vibe. Together we can touch the sky. We're dancing in the stars tonight, higher than the moon. Taking flight, feel the rhythm, feel the vibe. Together we can touch the sky.
Okay, let's continue. Now, people love to imagine that shared homes are full of secrets. Whispered drama, get it? Whispered secret drama, late night mysteries, and stories that normally would never be told out loud, never shared. If you're reading this podcast, or listening to it, sorry, hoping to uncover what really happens behind closed doors, then keep going, because I'm going to reveal everything, the full truth, and it's going to be shocking. I'm going to share everything, every X-rated detail. Why not? Nobody's watching except my 5 followers, so get ready. I'm going to let it go. So I'm going to reveal everything that I've encountered, every little secret, everything that you've probably thought of, I'm going to reveal. So, bit by bit, I'll tell you more until you reach a conclusion. So hang in there for a little bit, and I'll make your hair stand on end, because you won't believe it. And the truth might surprise you more than any scandal ever could. This is not a hook, not a book, sorry, not a book, rather real life things which happen behind closed doors, behind closed and blinded windows. Every secret I'm going to share with you. And you'll be surprised. In any case, the quiet beginning. There is a particular kind of silence that exists in a home before anyone moves in. It's not an empty feeling exactly, it's more like a held breath, a pause before the next chapter begins. Every landlord who is an on-site landlord knows this silence. It's the sound of a house waiting. And then one day the door opens, suitcases appear, voices echo down the hallway. A new pair of shoes lands by the entrance. A kettle boils for the first time in months. Strangers arrive, and the silence breaks. At first, the relationship is simple. A landlord, a renter, 2 separate worlds connected by a contract and a set of keys. But homes have a way of softening boundaries. Shared kitchens and shared washrooms become shared routines. Shared routines become shared stories, and shared stories, even small ones, begin to weave people together in ways no lease agreement ever mentions. This is how temporary families begin. Not with intervention, not with planning, not with declarations, but with the quiet, ordinary moments of living side by side. A landlord provides the home, the warmth, the stability, the predictability. Renters bring their youth, their culture, their laughter, their uncertainty, their dreams. And somewhere in the middle, a small ecosystem forms. Not quite friendship, at least not at first, not quite family, but something in between. Something fragile, something temporary, something real. Homes absorb these things. They hold the echoes of conversations, the rhythm of footsteps, the scent of cooking, the emotional weather of the people inside them. And when renters become more than renters, when they become companions to each other and familiar presence to the landlord, the house becomes more than a building, it becomes a witness. A witness to growth, a witness to change, a witness to the quiet, unspoken bonds that form when people share a roof, even if they never share their deepest secrets. And they do, and I'm going to share them with you. This is where our story begins, not with drama, not with conflict, but with the simple truth that living together changes people, even when no one intends it. Because when strangers become family, the house itself becomes part of the relationship. It becomes the container for everything that follows, the laughter, the tension, the late night conversations, the quiet mornings, the shifting dynamics, the unspoken emotions, the secrets. You're going to find out. And eventually the moment always comes when life begins to pull the temporary family apart. And that's what this podcast is about. And this is what this podcast is about. our little families breaking up. Not because anyone did anything wrong, not because anyone failed, but because life moves on, and it moves on unevenly. One person accelerates, another slows down. One finds direction, another loses it. One steps into a new chapter, another hesitates at the threshold. And the house, the quiet witness, feels the shift long before anyone says it out loud. This is not a story about blame. It's not a story about fault. It's not a story about who should have done what. It's a story about change and transition, about the emotional currents that run beneath the surface of shared living. It is a story that could happen to anyone, any landlord, any group of tenants, renters, any shared home, and it probably does. Because whenever people live together, even briefly, they create a small world. And when that world changes, everyone feels it, even the ones who stand quietly at the edges. This is the beginning of that story. This is the balance of a temporary family. Every temporary family develops its own balance, not intentionally, not consciously, but inevitably. Two renters arrive as strangers, and over time they begin to orbit each other. They share routines, jokes, frustrations, late night conversations, suffering brain damage at 80, cultural comforts and small rituals that make a foreign country feel a little less foreign. The landlord watches this from a respectful distance, close enough to notice the rhythm, far enough not to disturb it. In every shared home, there's an emotional geometry that forms on its own. One person becomes the steady person, one person becomes the dreamer, one person becomes the worrier, one becomes the planner, one becomes the quiet presence in the background. These roles aren't assigned, they simply emerge. And when the balance is right, the home feels warm, predictable, safe. Not because everything is perfect, but because everyone knows their place. Because everyone knows their place in the small ecosystem they've created. The balance is fragile. It only takes one change, one new job, one new opportunity, one new direction for the entire emotional structure to shift. And when it shifts, it rarely shifts evenly. One person moves forward, another hesitates. One adapts quickly, another clings to the familiar. One steps into a new chapter, another feels the ground move beneath their feet. This is not failure. This is not fault. This is simply an uneven rhythm of life. In every temporary family, there carries a moment when the emotional weight tilts. When one person's growth creates a quiet tremor in the home, not because growth is wrong, not because success is selfish, but because change always has an emotional cost, even when no one intends it. You notice it in the small changes, the altered routines, the different energy, the subtle tension that wasn't there before. You don't know the details, you're not meant to. You're not the confidant, you're an observer. And from the outside, you can see something universal. When one person's life accelerates, the other person often feels the imbalance, even if they don't say it. Not out of jealousy, not out of resentment, but out of the quiet fear that they are being left behind. This fear is not cultural, it's not generational, it's not tied to any specific country or community, it's just human. Because whenever two people walk side by side, for a time, they begin to measure their steps against each other, even if they don't mean to. And when one person suddenly takes a leap forward, the other must confront their own uncertainty. This is the moment when the emotional balance of a temporary family begins to shift. Not dramatically, not explosively, but quietly, like a change in the weather. The landlord feels the shift in the atmosphere of the home. The house feels different. The routines feel different. The energy feels different. It's not good or bad, it's simply the beginning of transition. Because every temporary family eventually reaches a crossroads, the moment when life pulls one person forward and leaves another standing still, unsure of what comes next. In the house, the quiet witness absorbs it. How people quote when the balance shifts. When the emotional balance of our temporary family begins to shift, people rarely talk about it. They don't sit down at the kitchen table and say, something feels different now. Life doesn't work that way. Instead, the change shows up in small, quiet ways. One person becomes restless, another person becomes withdrawn. One begins to dream bigger, another clings to the familiar. One step into the future, another tries to hold on to the present. These differences are subtle at first, almost invisible, but a landlord standing just outside the emotional circle can sense this long before the spoken word. You notice it in the rhythm of the house, the way one renter begins leaving earlier, coming home later, moving with a new sense of purpose, the way the other renter lingers in the kitchen a little longer, as if trying to hold on to something slipping away. The way conversations between them become shorter, or quieter, or more strained, not out of conflict, but out of misalignment. Because when two people begin to move at different speeds, the space between them changes. This is not a cultural issue. This is not generational. This is a personality flaw. This is not a personality flaw. Can't even read my own text. It's simply a human response to transition. Some people cope with change by running towards it. Others cope by holding on to what they know. Some cope by planning. Others cope by improvising. Some cope by seeking new experiences. Others cope by retreating into familiar routines. In a shared home, these coping styles become visible, not because anyone explains them, but because the house itself reflects them. A landlord sees the signs without knowing the story. You see the late nights, the early mornings, the shifting energy, the tired eyes, the quiet tension. You don't know the conversations between what are occurring behind closed doors. You don't know the fears being whispered to friends far away. You don't know the internal battles each person is fighting. You only see the surface, the behaviors, the routines, the atmosphere. And from the outside, you understand something universal. When people feel unsteady, they often cope in ways that don't look like coping at all. Some stay busy, some stay distracted, some stay in motion, some stay silent. Some cling to familiar comforts, food, language, routine. Some reach for new experiences, even if they're not ready for them. None of this is wrong. None of this is unhealthy. None of this is a sign of failure. It's simply the human attempt to navigate uncertainty. Because when a temporary family begins to drift apart, everyone feels the shift, even if they don't talk about it. And believe me, that's absolutely true. The person moving forward feels excitement mixed with guilt. The person standing still feels pride mixed with fear. The landlord feels the emotional weather changing even without knowing why. In the house, the quiet witness absorbs it all. It holds the echoes of laughter that once filled the kitchen. It holds the silence that follows when routines no longer align. It holds the invisible tension of two people trying to adjust to a new emotional landscape. This is the moment when the temporary family begins to stretch. Not break, not collapse, but stretch, as life pulled each person in a different direction. And stretching, like growing, is rarely comfortable, but is always human. The quiet role of the landlord. In every temporary family, there's someone who stands just outside the emotional center, not excluded, not unwelcomed, simply positioned at the edge, where responsibility meets observation. In a shared home, that person often is the landlord. The landlord provides the structure, the walls, the warmth, the stability, the predictability, but the emotional life of the home belongs to the renters. They are the ones who share the late night conversations, the cultural jokes, the whispered worries, the small triumphs and private fears. They are the ones who build the inner world of the home, the world that exists behind closed doors, in shared languages and familiar routines. Landlord is not part of that world, and that is certainly how it should be. Landlord's role is quieter, simpler, and in many ways more profound. To provide a safe place, to maintain the environment, to respect boundaries, to witness without intruding, to care without interfering, to support without being central. It is a role defined by presence, not participation. You see the comings and goings, you hear the laughter drifting down the hallway, you notice the shifting energy when the life becomes to change for the renters. You sense the emotional weather long before anyone speaks it aloud. But you are not the confidant. You are not the advisor. You are not the third member of the friendship. You are the quiet witness. And in many ways, this distance is a kindness to them and to you, because renters need space to grow, to struggle, to adapt, to make mistakes, to find their own way in a new country. They need room to build friendships on their own terms without feeling watched or guided. They need the freedom to navigate their emotional lives privately, even while living under someone else's roof. And the landlord, standing at the edge of this small ecosystem, learns something universal. You can care about people without being part of their inner circle. You can provide a home without being part of their story. You can witness their growth without shaping it. You can feel the emotional shifts without knowing the reasons behind them. This is not distance, this is respect. Because the landlord's role is not to direct the emotional life of the home. It is to hold the space where the emotional life unfolds. And when the balance begins to shift, when one renter moves forward and another hesitates, the landlord feels the change, but does not intervene. Not without indifference, not without detachment, but out of understanding. Understanding that young adults must navigate their own transitions. Understanding that friendships evolve in ways no outsider can predict. Understanding that temporary families are fragile by nature. Understanding that the home is a container, not a guide. And so the landlord watches quietly, respectfully, as the emotional geometry of the home rearranges itself. This is a tough podcast. You see the signs, you feel the atmosphere change, you sense the distance. You sense the distance growing between the renters. You notice the subtle ways they begin to drift. But you remain where you've always been, at the edge, present, not central, caring but not involved, witnessing but not shaping. This is the quiet role of the landlord, a role that is universal, unspoken, and deeply human. When the temporary family begins to separate, every temporary family eventually reaches the moment when life pulls apart. It doesn't happen suddenly, it doesn't happen dramatically, it doesn't happen with slammed doors or final speeches. It happens quietly. One person receives an opportunity, a job, a placement, a new city, a new chapter. Another person stays behind, finishing school, working part-time, trying to find their footing. The landlord remains where they have always been, the steady presence, the keeper of the home. And the house feels the shift before anyone says a word. The laughter that once filled the kitchen becomes less frequent. The shared routines begin to dissolve. The energy of the home changes, but not in a negative way, but in a way that signals transition, and it hurts. Because when one person steps forward into their future, the temporary family must adjust. The person leaving feels excitement, pride, and the weight. The person leaving feels excitement, pride, and the weight of stepping into adulthood. The person staying feels pride for their friend mixed with the quiet ache of being left in a familiar place while someone else moves ahead. The landlord feels the house exhale the way a home does when one of its voices prepares to go silent. This is not conflict, it's not betrayal, this is not abandonment. It's simply the natural ending of a chapter. It's simply the natural ending of a chapter. Every shared home has these moments, the final dinners, the last late night conversations, the packing of boxes, the quiet goodbyes in the hallway, moments that feel ordinary on the surface but carry the emotional weight of transition. The landlord watches these moments with a kind of gentle distance. You see the excitement in the person leaving. You see the uncertainty in the person staying. You see the way they try to hold onto their friendship, even if life pulls them in different directions. You don't know the details, you're not meant to, and you're not inside their emotional world, but you feel the shift. Because when a temporary family begins to separate, the house itself changes. The room that was once full of life becomes quiet. The kitchen loses one person's rhythm. The hallway feels longer. The evenings feel different. Not worse, not better, just different. And the person who remains, the one who stays in the home, must navigate a new emotional landscape. They must adjust to the silence where there used to be conversation. They must rebuild routines that once depended on someone else's presence. They must find their own rhythm in a home that suddenly feels larger and emptier. The adjustment is universal. It happens in student rentals, in shared apartments, in basement suites, in homes across every city, in every country. It happens whenever two people build a life together, even briefly, and then one moves on. The landlord sees this adjustment from the outside. You see the tiredness that comes from emotional strain. You see the restlessness that comes from uncertainty. You see the coping mechanism, whatever form they take. You see the way that the remaining renter tries to fill the space left behind, not because they're weak, but because they're lost, but because the change always leaves a shadow before it leaves clarity. And the landlord standing at the edge of this shifting emotional landscape understands something universal. When a temporary family separates, everyone must find their new place, including the home itself. The house must learn to hold a different rhythm. The renter who stays must learn to navigate a new emotional reality. The renter who leaves must learn to stand on their own in a new chapter. And the landlord must learn to witness the transition without stepping in. This is the quiet truth of shared living. Temporary families form, temporary families change. Temporary families dissolve, and through it all the home remains, the silent witness to the human stories unfolding within its walls. The aftershocks of departure. This is a tough podcast for me. In any case, when one member of the temporary family leaves, the departure itself is only the first moment of change. The real shift comes afterwards, in the quiet, in the space that remains, in the routines that suddenly feel unbalanced. Homes remember people. They remember footsteps, voices, laughter, the rhythm of daily life. So when someone leaves, the house doesn't simply become quieter, it becomes different. The silence is not empty, it's full of memory. The person who stays behind feels this most acutely. They wake up to a home that looks the same but feels unfamiliar. The kitchen still holds the same dishes, the same chairs, the same morning light, but the energy has changed. The absence is not loud, but it's present. This is a universal experience. It happens in student rentals, in shared apartments, in basement suites, in houses where young adults begin their lives far from home. It happens whenever two people build a routine together, even unintentionally, and then one of them steps into a new chapter. The person who remains must now navigate the silence where conversation used to be, the empty space where companionship once lived. The shift from shared routines to solitary ones. The emotional weight of being the one who stayed. This is not weakness, this is not immaturity, this is not a flaw. It is simply the human response to change. Because when someone leaves, the person who remains must renegotiate their relationship with the home and with themselves. Some people respond by staying busy. Some respond by withdrawing. Some respond by seeking new connections. Some respond by clinging to familiar comforts. Some respond by drifting through the days, unsure what to do with the new quiet. A landlord sees this from the outside. You notice the tiredness that comes from emotional strain. You notice the restlessness that comes from uncertainty. You notice the subtle ways the remaining renter tries to fill the space with activity, with distraction, with anything that keeps the silence from feeling too heavy. You don't know the details. You're not meant to. You're not inside the emotional world, but you feel the shift. You really do. Because when a temporary family dissolves, the emotional aftershocks ripple through the home, through the routines, through the atmosphere, through the very walls. The landlord standing at the edge of this transition understands something universal. The person who leaves begins a new chapter. The person who stays must learn to live in the old one without them. This is not a story of abandonment. It's not a story of conflict. It's not a story of blame. It's a story of timing. I think I write these things better than I do speaking them. One person's life moves forward, another person's life passes. Another person's life pauses. This isn't about dying. Well, maybe it is. And the home becomes a space where two realities coexist, one in memory, one in the present. The landlord's role remains the same: to provide stability, to maintain the environment, to witness it without intruding, to care without stepping into the emotional center, even though I'm certainly involved in it. Because this home is not just physical space, it's an emotional container. When a person leaves, the container must adjust to hold the weight of the person or persons who remain. This adjustment is slow, it's quiet, it's deeply human, it hurts like hell. Sorry, I said a bad word. I hope YouTube won't cancel this. And the house, the silent witness, absorbs it all.
In the quiet of the night, shadows call my name. Whispers of a love that faded, nothing is the same. Memories, they linger like ghosts within my mind. In the echoes of the past, your heart I try to find. Tears fall like rain in this empty room. Every note of sorrow, a haunting tune. Loneliness, my only friend, in the silence of my heart. Since you've gone away, everything's torn apart.
The stars up in the sky, they used to shine so bright. Now they're just a reminder of the darkest night. I wander through the moments, lost without your touch, longing for the days when we loved so much. Tears fall like rain in this
darkness comes around.
Time moves slowly like a river running dry. The colors of the world fade to a grayscale sky. We trace the lines of our love in the tears that fall. Each drop a reminder of the rise and the fall. Tears fall like rain in this empty room. Every note of sorrow, a haunting tune. Loneliness, my only friend, in silence of my heart. Since you've gone away, everything's torn apart. If I could turn back time, I'd hold you close again. But now I'm left with shadows and an endless rain. In the stillness, your voice is just a distant sound, a memory that fades as the darkness comes around. In the quiet of the night, shadows call my name. Whispers of love that fade, nothing is the same. I'll carry this heartache through the endless days, hoping for a moment when the pain will fade away.
Okay, let's continue. Culture, comfort, and the ways we adapt. Every shared home carries more than furniture and belongings. It carries culture. Not in the grand academic sense. Academic, love it. But in the small everyday ways people express who they are. The food they cook, the language they speak, the routines they follow, the comforts they cling to, the habits that make a foreign place feel familiar. When renters come from far away, these cultural anchors become even more important. Food becomes memory, language becomes safety, routine becomes stability, familiarity becomes a shield against the uncertainty of a new country. This is universal. It happens with international students, with newcomers, with young adults living abroad for the first time. It happens in homes where people are trying to build a life while holding on to the pieces of the life they left behind. And in a shared home, these cultural comforts come in the shape of emotional landscape. Two renters may share a background, a language, a set of traditions, and these shared elements become the glue that holds their temporary family together. They cook together, they laugh together, they speak the language of their home country, and create a small cultural island inside this house, a house. The landlord standing at the edge of the island sees the beauty of it, but he's not a participant, not really. You see the pride in their transitions, you see the joy in their cooking, you see the comfort they find in speaking their own language, you see how familiar things help them navigate the challenge of living far away from home. But you also see something else, something universal and deeply human. The same comforts that help people feel safe can also make change more difficult. When life begins to shift, when one renter moves forward and the other remains, cultural comfort becomes both a refuge and a barrier. Yep, it's working. Okay. This is not a flaw. This is not stubbornness. This is not resistance. It's simply a human instinct to hold on to what feels familiar when everything else feels uncertain. Some people adapt quickly to new environments. Others adapt slowly. Some embrace new experiences with excitement. Others approach them with curiosity, protecting the parts of themselves that feel most vulnerable. In a shared home, these differences become visible. One renter may step confidently into a new chapter, a new job, a new city, a new identity. Another renter may cling more tightly to the comforts of home, the food, the language, the routines that remind them of who they are. Neither approach is wrong, neither approach is superior. They are simply different ways of navigating the same emotional terrain. The landlord sees this from the outside, and they really do. You see the cultural island that once balanced, that felt balanced begin to tilt. You see the one person expanding outward while the other person retreats inward. You see how shared routines begin to dissolve as their paths diverge, and you understand something universal. Culture is not just about where we come from, it's about how we cope. It is the lens which makes us interpret change. It is the anchor we hold when life feels unstable. It is the comfort we return to when the world outside feels too large. In a temporary family, these cultural anchors can bring people together, and they can also shape the way people drift apart. Not out of conflict, not out of resentment, but out of the simple truth that people adapt at different speeds in different ways for different reasons. In the home, the quiet witness holds it all. The laughter of a shared language, the laughter in a shared language, the scent of familiar cooking, the silence that follows when one voice leaves the house, the way the remaining renter clings to the comforts that remind them of home. Culture becomes both memory and survival, both connection and protection, both bridge and boundary. And in the emotional landscape of a shared home, it shapes the way temporary families form, evolve, and eventually dissolve. The landlord's quiet reflection. There is a particular kind of awareness that comes from standing at the edge of other people's lives, not inside their circle, not outside of it, but close enough to feel the warmth, far enough not to be burned by the intensity of their emotions. This is the landlord's place in a temporary family. You are not the center of the story. You are not the emotional anchor. You are not the one who shapes the friendship or the future. You are the witness. And witnessing is its own kind of emotional experience, and I can tell you it really is. You see people arrive with hope and uncertainty. You see them build routines, friendships, small rituals that make the house feel alive. You see them grow, struggle, adapt, sometimes drift apart. You see them leave one by one as life pulls them into new chapters. And through it all, you remain. The house remains. The memories remain. But the people change. This is the quiet truth of hosting, of renting rooms. You become part of someone's life without ever being part of their story. You provide the home where their story unfolds, but you're not written into the chapters. You see the emotional weather, but you're not inside the storm. You feel the shift in the atmosphere, but you do not know the conversations that caused it. The distance is not loneliness. It's not exclusion. It's not rejection, it's simply the nature of the role. The landlord is the steady presence, the one who keeps the lights on, the one who maintains the environment, who ensures the home remains a place of safety and warmth. But emotionally you remain at the perimeter. You hear laughter drifting down the hallway, but you do not know the joke. You hear conversations in a language that's not yours, but you understand the comfort it brings. You see the bond between renters deepen, but you know it's not your bond to share. You feel the shift when one renter moves forward and the other remains, but you do not know the private fears behind their eyes. And yet you care. Not in a parental way, not in a possessive way, not in a way that demands closeness. You care in a way that a gardener cares for a tree. I love that one. Tending the soil, providing the conditions, watching it grow, knowing it will eventually outgrow the space you've given it. You care in the way a lighthouse cares for ships, offering guidance without steering them, providing light without expecting gratitude, standing firm even when a ship moves on. You care in a way that home cares for its occupants, quietly, steadily, without needing to be acknowledged. This is the emotional truth of hosting. You're part of the environment that shapes people's lives, but you're not part of their emotional center of those lives. That's enough. It's enough to know you provided safety. It's enough to know you offered warmth. It's enough to know you created a space where people could grow. even if they grew in different directions. It's enough to know that the house held them. Held them through their transitions. Even if you did not witness the details. Because the landlord's role is not to be remembered, is to provide the place where memories are made. And when the temporary family dissolves, when one renter leaves and the other remains, the landlord feels the shift, reflects on it, and understands something universal. People drift in and people drift out of lives. People are here one day and they're gone permanently the next. Those are the facts through an old person's eyes. We understand the timeline. But the impact of their presence lingers long after they're gone. The house remembers, the landlord remembers, and the story continues, not as a personal narrative, but as the universal truth of the way humans share space, share time, and share pieces of their lives without fully realizing it. The resistance of the one who remains. When a temporary family separates, the person who leaves steps into a new chapter, but the person who remains must learn to live in the old chapter without them. This is one of the quiet truths of shared living, the kind that rarely gets spoken about. The person who stays behind is not weak, they are not lost, they're not failing to adapt, they're simply adjusting. Adjusting to a home that feels familiar but different. Adjusting to routines that no longer match someone else's rhythm. Adjusting to the silence that follows a departure. Adjusting to the emotional weight of being the one who stayed. This adjustment is universal. It happens in student rentals, in shared apartments, in basement suites, in houses where young adults begin their lives far away from home. It happens whenever two people build a small world together, and unintentionally, one of them steps out of it. The person who remains must now rebuild their emotional landscape. They must find new routines. They must rediscover their independence. They must learn to navigate the home without the presence that once balanced it. They must face the quiet moments that used to be filled with conversation. And this rebuilding is rarely smooth. It hurts. Some days feel normal. Some days feel heavy. Some days feel strangely empty. Some days feel unexpectedly hopeful. Because resilience is not a straight line, it is a series of small steps, forward, backwards, sideways, as the person slowly finds their footing again. The landlord sees this from the outside. You notice subtle change of adjustment, the tiredness that comes from emotional strain, the relentlessness that comes from uncertainty, the attempts to fill the silence with activity, the moments of stillness that reveal how deeply the change is felt, and it really is. You don't know the details. You're not meant to. You're not inside the emotional world, but you understand something universal. When someone remains after a departure, they must rebuild, not just their routines, but their sense of self. They must learn who they are without the person who once shared their space. They must learn how to stand on their own in a home that suddenly feels larger. They must learn how to carry the memories without being weighed down by them. This rebuilding takes time, it takes patience, it takes quiet courage, it takes the willingness to sit with discomfort until it becomes clarity. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the home begins to find a new equilibrium. The silence becomes less heavy, the routines become more natural, the emotional weight begins to lift, the person who remains begins to move forward in their own way, at their own pace. Not in competition with the person who left, not in comparison, not in resentment, simply in the rhythm that life has given them. Because resilience is not about matching someone else's speed, it's about finding your own. And the landlord standing at the edge of this quiet transformation sees something universal and deeply human. People grow in different directions at different times, for different reasons, and every path is valid. Person who leaves grows outward. Person who remains grows inward. Both are forms of strength. Both are forms of adaptation. Both are part of the emotional landscape of shared living. In the home, the silent witness holds space for all of it. The landlord and the impermanence of shared lives. There is a moment after the departure, after the silence settle, after the routine shift, when the landlord finally feels the emotional weight of the transition. Not in a dramatic way, not in a personal way, but in a reflective way. Because hosting is not just about providing a room, it's about witnessing the quiet impertinence of human connection. People arrive, people grow, people drift, people leave. And through it all, the landlord remains the steady presence, the keeper of the home, the observer of lives that intersect briefly before moving on. This consistency brings its own type of reflection. You begin to understand that every renter who passes through the home leaves something behind, not belongings, not object, but traces of their presence. The echo of their laughter, the rhythm of their footsteps, the scent of their cooking, the energy they brought into the space, the emotional weather they carried with them. These traces linger long after the person is gone, not in a haunting way, in a human way. Because homes remember the people who lived in them, even when these people forget the home. The landlord feels this memory more deeply than anyone else. You remember the early days when the renters were strangers, learning how to share a kitchen. You remember the middle days when the house felt full and balanced and alive. You remember the late days when the emotional geometry shifted and the temporary family began to stretch. You remember the departure, the silence, the aftershocks. And now in the quiet that follows, you reflect on what it means to be part of other people's lives without ever being central or really a part of them. It's a strange kind of intimacy, one-sided, gentle, observational. You see people at their most human, hopeful, uncertain, ambitious, overwhelmed, joyful, lonely, resilient. You see them navigate the complexity of young adulthood, the friendships, the cultural adjustments, the emotional growing pains. You see them become visions of themselves they didn't know they were capable of becoming, and then they leave. Not because they want to escape, not because they're ungrateful, not because they're abandoning anything. They leave because that's the nature of temporary families. They're meant to dissolve. It's just part of being a temporary family. They are meant to evolve. They are meant to be stepping stones, not destinations. They are meant to be chapters, not entire books. The landlord understands this better than anyone. You know that your role is not to hold people in place. Your role is to provide the space where they can grow, even if that growth takes them away from your home you've given them. And in this understanding, there is a quiet beauty, because hosting is not about permanence, it's about presence. It's about being the steady ground beneath someone's feet while they figure out who they are. It's about offering warmth without expecting closeness. It's about witnessing transformation without needing to be part of it. It's about holding space for people who are passing through, not to stay, but to become. And when they leave, the landlord reflects on something universal. We're all temporary in each other's lives, but the impact can be lasting. The renters move on, the landlord remains. The home breathes in the silence, adjusts to the new rhythm, prepares for the next chapter. The next pair of stranger who will arrive, unpack their lives, and unknowingly create another temporary family, and the cycle continues. Not as repetition, but as renewal. Because every departure makes room for a new beginning, and every silence prepares the home for new voices. Every ending creates space for another story to unfold, and the landlord, the quiet witness, understands that this impermanence is not a loss, It's the essence of shared living. The quiet generosity of hosting. Hosting is often misunderstood. People think it's about renting a room, collecting payment, maintaining a property. They think it's a transition, simple, practical, straightforward. I can tell you it's not. But anyone who's hosted or rented rooms long enough knows the truth. Hosting is an act of quiet generosity. At least it can become that. It's different than a landlord purchasing a home, an additional home where he or she is not present. This new home is just for renters and making money. When you offer rooms and the owner lives on site, the owner lives there, it's a profound difference, absolutely astronomically different. The equation is much more complex. Not dramatic generosity, not performative generosity, not the kind that demands recognition. It's the kind that lives in the background, steady, consistent, almost invisible. You open your home to strangers. You give them a place to land in a world that feels unfamiliar. You offer stability when everything else in their life is shifting. You provide warmth without asking for closeness. You create a space where they can grow, even if that growth takes them away from you. This generosity is not loud. It's not sentimental. Yeah, right. And it's not emotional in the traditional sense. Actually, it is. It's practical. It's grounded. It is steady. It is the generosity of keeping the lights on, fixing what breaks, shoveling the snow, maintaining the heat, respecting their privacy, giving them room to breathe, allowing them to be themselves. It is the generosity of presence without intrusion. Ensuring that the renters, the students, have no problems, no issues, where problems and issues are immediately addressed and resolved. And this kind of generosity shapes people more than they realize. Because when young adults move far from home to study, to work, to build a future, they need more than a roof. They need a place where they can be certain that they will not be judged. They need a place where they can fail quietly and try again. They need a place where they can figure out who they're becoming. A landlord provides this space, not through emotional involvement, but through consistency. You become the steady ground beneath their feet. You become the quiet reassurance that the home will not collapse, even if they feel like it might. You become the background stability that allows them to take risks, make mistakes, and grow. And in return, you give them something too, though they rarely realize it. They give you the chance to witness transformation. They give you the privilege of seeing people at the beginning of their lives. They give you the reminder that growth is messy, uneven, unpredictable, and deeply human. They give you stories, not personal stories, but universal ones. The resilience, friendship, culture, identity, and change. They give all of this to the home. When they leave behind traces of themselves, not in a way that burdens you, but in a way that enriches you. I don't think that's true. When they leave, it kills you. Because hosting teaches you something profound. People do not need to stay in your life to have an impact on it. The renters move on, the landlord remains. But the experience of hosting, the quiet generosity, the witnessing, the reflection, becomes part of who you are. It teaches you patience, and we'll get to what I've been taught by having these international students in this home. They've taught me a lot. It teaches you humility. It teaches you humility. It teaches you the value of boundaries. It teaches you the beauty of impermanence. It teaches you that caring for people does not require being central to their story. And it teaches that every temporary family, no matter how brief, leaves the home and the host changed in some small way. Not dramatically, not painfully, not sentimentally, but meaningfully. Because hosting is not about permanence. It's about offering a place where people can become themselves, even if they only pass through your life for a short time. And that, in its own way, is a quiet form of generosity that echoes long after the renters have gone. Every shared home is a chapter. There is a moment after the dust of transition settles when the landlord finally understands the deeper truth behind hosting. Every shared home is a chapter, not a destination, not a final step, not a permanent arrangement, a chapter. A place where people pause, grow, struggle, adapt, and eventually move on. It's not a sad truth, it's not a loss, it's not a failure. It's simply the nature of shared living. People arrive at different stages of their lives. They bring their histories, their cultures, their hopes, their uncertainties. They build routines, friendships, and temporary families. They change, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once, and they leave, carrying the chapter with them into whatever comes next. The landlord remains not unchanged. You can't remain unchanged. You are changed. Because hosting is not passive, it's not neutral, it's not just a business arrangement. It's a quiet exchange. The renters take something with them, the stability you offer, the memories they made, the growth they experience inside your home. You take something too, the lessons, the reflections, the understanding of how people evolve when given space to do so. Every chapter teaches you something different. One chapter teaches you about cultural comfort, how people cling to familiar routines when a world feels overwhelming. Another teaches you about resilience, how young adults rebuild themselves after emotional shifts. Another teaches you about impermanence, how temporary families form and dissolve without anyone ever doing anything wrong. Another teaches you about generosity, how providing a home is an act of care, even when it goes unspoken. And together these chapters form a kind of wisdom. Not the wisdom of age or authority, not the wisdom of someone who has lived the same story, but the wisdom of someone who has witnessed many stories unfold in the same place. You begin to understand people grow at different speeds. Friendships shift without warning. Cultural anchors shape emotional responses. Departures are not rejections. Staying behind is not failure. Silence is not emptiness. Resilience is not loud. Hosting is not simple. You begin to see the beauty of impermanence, the way each chapter prepares the home for the next one. Because the house itself becomes a kind of vessel for human experience. It holds the laughter of one group, the quiet of another, the uncertainty of a third. It absorbs the emotional weather of each temporary family. It becomes richer, deeper, more layered with every person who passes through. And the landlord, standing at the edge of these unfolding stories, realizes something universal. A shared home is not defined by who stays the longest, but by the lives who briefly interact within the walls. The renters carry the chapter forward into their lives, into their futures. The landlord carries the reflection forward into their understanding, and the home carries the memory forward into its atmosphere. This is the quiet beauty of hosting. You are part of people's lives without needing to be central to them. You provide the space where they become who they are becoming. You witness their transitions without shaping them. You hold the chapter without owning the story. And when the chapter ends, as all chapters do, you prepare the home for the next beginning. Because every departure is also an opening. Every silence is also a reset. Every ending is also an invitation for new voices, new routines, new temporary families. The cycle continues, not as repetition, but as renewal. The landlord, the quiet witness, understand this is the true meaning of shared living. People come and go, homes breathe and change, chapters open and close, and through it all, the act of hosting remains a small, steady contribution to the human experience.
Can't accept it. This can't be the end you promised me. Now you're gone. Can't believe.
This home finds a new balance. After a departure, after the silence, after the emotional dust settles, something subtle begins to happen inside the home. It starts slowly, it does, really slow. Quietly, almost invisibly, the house begins to breathe again. Believe me, it's not fast. The loss of a person, it kills you. Not in the same rhythm as before, the rhythm that belonged to the temporary family that came and went, but in a new rhythm, one that emerges from the person who remains in the space that has opened. This is the natural cycle of sharing a home. Homes do not stay empty for long. They wait, they reset, they prepare. Yet eventually new renters arrive, not to replace the old ones. That'll never happen. But because people are not replaceable, but to begin their own chapter. They bring their own histories, their own cultures, their own uncertainties, their own hopes. They unpack their belongings, their routines, their personalities. They fill in the silence with new voices, new laughter, new energy. And slowly the home shifts again. Person who remains begins to adjust to the presence of someone new. They learn new rhythms, they build new routines, they discover new forms of companionship, not identical to the old ones, but meaningful in their own way. This adjustment is not instant, it's not automatic, it's not effortless, it's very gradual. Because the heart of a shared home is not built in a day, it's built in the small, ordinary moments. Two people cooking at the same time, a joke shared in a hallway, a quiet conversation about school or work, the sound of footsteps returning late at night, the comfort of knowing someone else is in the house. These moments accumulate, they form the foundation of a new temporary family. Not the same as the last one, not better, not worse, just different. Because every combination of people creates different emotional geometry, a different balance, a different atmosphere, a different story. The landlord sees this with a kind of gentle familiarity. I don't think I wrote that very well because I don't think that's true, but in any case, as you've seen before, you'll see it again. The cycle is not repetitive, it is renewing. Each new renter brings something unique, each new pairing forms its own dynamic, each new chapter adds another layer to the home's memory, and the landlord understands something universal. Homes are not defined by who leaves, they're defined by how they continue. The house does not mourn the departure, it absorbs it. It adjusts, it prepares for the next beginning. The person who remains does the same. They carry the memory of the old company, the old family, the old temporary family, but they do not live inside it. They open themselves, slowly, cautiously, to the personality of the new connection. They learn that resilience is not about forgetting the past, but about making room for the future. And the landlord standing at the edge of this renewal sees the quiet beauty in it all. I think I write it better than I speak it. I don't think that's true. In any case, people come and go, homes breathe and change, temporary families form and dissolve, and yet the cycle continues, not out of repetition, but out of life. Because shared living is not static, it's not fixed, it's not permanent. It's a fluid, evolving, and it's human. Every time the home finds a new balance, it becomes a reminder that things are not final, and they are simply transitions. Transitions into new voices, new routines, new stories, new temporary families. The landlord remains the steady presence, the home remains the silent witness, the life continues to unfold within its walls, one chapter at a time. The wisdom of witnessing. There's a kind of wisdom that doesn't come from living the story yourself, but from watching many stories unfold in front of you. This is the landlord's wisdom. Not the wisdom of age, not the wisdom of authority, not the wisdom of someone who has all the answers. It's the wisdom of witnessing. You see people arrive at certain moments in their lives. You see them navigate the challenges of being far from home. You see them build friendships, routines, and temporary families. You see them grow in uneven, unpredictable ways. You see them drift apart, reconnect, struggle, succeed, and eventually move on. And through all of this, you begin to understand something that most people only learn much later in life. Human connection is both powerful and fragile. Impermanence is not a flaw, it's a natural shape of our relationships. You learn that people rarely grow at the same speed. You learn that friendships shift even when no one intends them to. You learn that cultural comfort can both be a refuge and a boundary. You learn that silence can be full of meaning. You learn that resilience is often quiet, not loud. You learn that letting people go is part of caring for them. This wisdom doesn't arrive all at once. It accumulates, slowly, gently. With each temporary family that passes through the home, you begin to see patterns. How young adults cope with uncertainty, how they cling to familiar routines when life feels overwhelming, how they adapt in ways that surprise even themselves, how they struggle privately while appearing fine on the surface, how they find strength in each other, how they drift apart when their paths diverge, how they rebuild after emotional shifts. You begin to understand that none of this is personal. It's not about you. It's not about the home. It's not about anything you did or didn't do. It's simply the human experience unfolding in front of you. This understanding brings a kind of peace. You stop trying to interpret every shift. You stop wondering what happened behind closed doors. You stop feeling responsible for the emotional weather inside the home. You stop taking departures as losses. You stop seeing silence as emptiness. Instead, you see the beauty in the cycle. People arrive, people grow, people change, people leave. People are replaced by new people, and the home continues to breathe through each transition. The landlord's wisdom is not dramatic, it's not philosophical in the academic sense. It's not something you can write in a textbook. It is practical, it's grounded. It is earned through observation, not instruction, and it teaches you something universal. You can deeply care about people without needing to hold on to them. You can create stability without being central. You can witness transformation without shaping it. You can be a part of someone's life without being part of their story. This is the quiet dignity of hosting. It's not glamorous, it's not sentimental, it's not emotional in a way that movies portray emotion. It's steady, humble, it's human. And the wisdom you gain from witnessing these cycles becomes part of who you are, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, in a way that real understanding always does. The imprint of temporary families. Even though temporary families dissolve, something of them always remains. Not in a dramatic way, not in a sentimental way, not in a way that demands attention, in a quieter way, a human way. Because whenever people share a home, even briefly, they leave an imprint on each other. Not a mark, not a scar, not a burden, an imprint. A subtle shaping of how each person understands companionship, independence, culture, and change. The renters carry this imprint with them when they leave. They carry the memory of the routines they built, the comfort they found, the challenges they faced, the ways they adapted, the person they were becoming in that moment of their life. They carry the lessons, not consciously, but not deliberately, but naturally, into their next chapter, and the landlord carries something too. Not the personal details, not the private conversations, not the emotional specifics, but the essence of what unfolded. You carry the understanding of how people grow in uneven rhythms. You carry the awareness that I'm losing it. You carry the awareness that cultural comfort shapes emotional resilience. You carry the recognition that silence is often full of meaning. You carry the reminder that people drift apart without doing anything wrong. You carry the quiet truth that letting people go is part of caring for them. This imprint is not heavy, it's not painful, not sentimental. It is grounding. It teaches you that hosting is not about permanence, it's about presence. It teaches you that connection does not require closeness. It teaches you that witnessing is its own form of participation. It teaches you that people can matter without staying. It teaches you that every chapter, no how brief, has value. And the home itself carries an imprint too. Homes remember the energy of the people who lived in them. They remember the laughter, the footsteps, the routines, the emotional weather. They remember the temporary families that formed within their walls. Not as ghosts, not as nostalgia, as atmosphere. As depth, as character, as the quiet layering of human presence over time. This is why a home never feels exactly the same after someone leaves. Not because something is missing, but because something has been added. A layer, a memory, an imprint. And when the new renters arrive, they don't replace the old ones. They simply add their own layer to the home's history, to the story. This is a quiet beauty of shared living. People come and go, and it hurts. But the imprint of their presence remains in the home, in the landlord, and in each other, not loudly, not dramatically, not sentimentally, but meaningfully. Because temporary families may dissolve, but the impact of living together, even briefly, becomes part of who we are. Stepping back and letting the story unfold. There comes a point in every cycle of hosting when the landlord realizes something essential. You're not the author of the story unfolding in your home. You're the caretaker of the space where the story happens. The realization doesn't arrive suddenly, it arrives gradually, through experience, through observation, through the quiet accumulation of moments. At first, the landlord might feel the instinct to interpret the dynamics between renters, to wonder what caused the shift, to question whether something should be said or done, to feel responsible for the emotional atmosphere of the home. But over time, after witnessing several separate families form, evolve, and dissolve, a deeper understanding emerges. The emotional life of the home belongs to the people living in it, not to the person providing it. You begin to step back, not out of indifference, not out of detachment, not out of coldness, out of respect. Respect for the renter's autonomy, respect for their privacy, respect for their right to navigate their own transitions, respect for the natural ebb and flow of human connection. You learn that friendships shift without your involvement. Tensions resolve without your guidance. Departures happen without your influence. Resilience grows without your intervention. You learn that your role is not to shape the story. Your role is to hold the space where the story can unfold safely. This stepping back is not passive. It's not intentional. It is thoughtful. It is grounded as the wisdom of witnessing. You maintain the home. You provide stability. You offer kindness when needed. You respect boundaries always. You respect without intruding. You care without inserting yourself. In doing so, you allow the renters to experience something essential, the freedom to grow on their own terms. Because young adults living far from home need space. Space to make mistakes, space to form bonds, space to drift apart, space to rebuild, space to become who they are becoming. A landlord who steps back gives them that space. And in return, you gain something too. A closer understanding of your place in the emotional architecture of the home. You are the foundation, not the structure. You are the environment, not the story. You are a witness, not the participant. This clarity brings peace. You stop trying to interpret every shift. You stop wondering what happened behind closed doors. You stop feeling responsible for the emotional weather inside the home. You stop carrying the weight of transitions that were never yours to manage. Instead, you focus on what is yours: the warmth of the house, the stability of the environment, the respect for boundaries, the quiet generosity of hosting, the steady presence that supports without shaping. And in this clarity, you discover something universal. Letting people grow in their own direction is one of the most respectful forms of care. You don't hold them back. You don't pull them forward. You don't insert yourself into their emotional world. You simply provide the space where their world can unfold. And when the temporary family dissolves, as all temporary families do, you step back again, allowing the next chapter to begin without carrying the emotional residue of the last one. This is the quiet discipline of hosting. This is the dignity of boundaries. This is the wisdom of witnessing. And it is what allows the home to remain a place of renewal, not repetition, a place where new stories can unfold without being overshadowed by the ones that came before. The emotional neutrality of the home. Homes have a strange kind of wisdom that comes from holding many lives, many routines, many temporary families without ever choosing sides. A home does not judge. Home does not compare. Home does not prefer one chapter over another. It simply absorbs. It absorbs the laughter of one group, the silence of another, the tension of a third, and the warmth of a fourth. It absorbs the cultural rhythm, the cooking, the music, the language, without ever deciding which one belongs more. It absorbs the emotional weather, the excitement, the uncertainty, the drifting, the rebuilding, without ever labeling any of it good or bad. This neutrality is not coldness, it's not indifference, it's not emptiness, it's capacity. The capacity to hold many stories without being defined by any single one. The capacity to welcome new people without erasing the memory of those who have come before. The capacity to remain steady even as the emotional landscape inside shifts again and again. The landlord sees the neutrality more clearly than anyone. You see how the home adjusts to each new renter. You see how it breathes differently depending on who lives in it. You see how it becomes warm, quiet, lively, tense, peaceful, or uncertain. Not because the house changes, but because the people inside it change. And yet the home never clings to any particular version of itself. When one temporary family dissolves, the house does not mourn. When a new one forms, the house does not celebrate. It simply shifts, quietly, naturally, without resistance. This neutrality teaches the landlord something important. The home is not attached to the past. It is always ready for the next beginning. It does not hold on to energy of those who left. It does not compare the new renters to the old ones. It does not create old dynamics. It does not try to preserve what once was. It simply resets, not by forgetting, but by making room. This is why a home can feel different with every new group of renters. Not because the walls have changed, but because the home is emotionally porous. It reflects the people living in it. It adapts to their rhythms, becomes the container for their chapter, not the echo of someone else's. And the landlord watching this quiet transformation learns something universal. People often struggle to let go of what a home used to feel like. But the home itself never struggles. It moves forward effortlessly. This is the emotional neutrality of the home. It holds without changing, without clinging, remembers without dwelling, it adapts without resistance, it welcomes without comparison, it resets without hesitation. And in this neutrality, there's a lesson for everyone. Renters, landlords, anyone who has ever shared a space with others. The past shapes us. The past shapes us. But it does not have to define what comes next. The past shapes us, but it does not have to define what comes next. Homes understands this instinctively. Humans learn it slowly. The landlord standing at the edge of this quiet wisdom begins to see that the home's neutrality is not emptiness, it is resilience. The resilience to hold many stories, to release them, and remain open for the next one. The strength of emotional distance. At some point, after witnessing enough temporary families rise and fall, the landlord begins to understand something that most people never fully grasp. Emotional distance is not a weakness, it's a form of strength. Not the cold kind, not the detached kind, not the I don't care kind, the grounded kind, the respectful kind, the kind that protects everyone involved. Because a shared home, emotional distance is not about shunning people out or shutting them out. It's about giving them the freedom to live their lives without feeling watched, judged, or influenced. It is the boundary that allows renters to form their own friendships, navigate their own conflicts, cope with their own transitions, grow in their own directions. And it allows the landlord to provide stability without becoming entangled, care without becoming central, witness without absorbing the emotional weight, support without crossing into someone else's story. The distance is not empathy, it's not indifference, it's not an emotional absence, it's for clarity. Clarity about rules and roles, clarity about boundaries, clarity about what belongs to you and what does not. You begin to understand the renter's friendship is theirs, it's not yours. Their conflicts are theirs, not yours. Their coping mechanisms are theirs, not yours. Their departures are theirs, not yours. Their emotional weathers is theirs, not yours. You are the environment, not the ecosystem. You are the foundation, not the structure. You are the witness, not the participant. And this clarity protects you. It protects you from carrying the emotional burdens that were never yours. It protects you from interpreting shifts that had nothing to do with you. It protects you from feeling responsible for dynamics you did not create. It protects you from absorbing the aftershocks of transitions you did not cause. It also protects the renters. It protects them from feeling observed. It protects them from feeling judged. It protects them from feeling that their private lives are being interpreted. It protects them from the pressure of performing emotional harmony for the landlord. This distance creates safety, not the safety of closeness, but the safety of space. Space to grow, space to struggle, space to drift, space to rebuild, space to become. And the landlord standing at the edge of this emotional architecture realizes something universal. Boundaries are not walls. They are structures that allow connection to exist without becoming entanglement. You can care about the renters without stepping into their emotional world. You can feel the atmosphere shift without trying to fix it. You can witness their transitions without interpreting them. You can provide a home without becoming part of their story. This is not distance in the emotional sense, it is distance in the respectful sense. This kind says, I will give you space to be who you are, and I will not make your journey about me. This is the strength of emotional distance. It allows the landlord to remain steady. It allows the renters to remain free. It allows the home to remain neutral. It allows the temporary family to form and dissolve naturally. It allows everyone, landlord, renter, home, to play their role without carrying the weight of roles that do not belong to them. Every temporary family is complete in its own way. One of the quiet realizations that comes with hosting, the kind that only emerges after winning many cycles of people's coming and going, is this. Every temporary family is complete in its own way, not perfect, not balanced, not harmonious in every moment, but complete. Complete in the sense that it contains everything it needs for the chapter it represents. Complete in the sense that people who shared that space were exactly the people meant to be there at that time in their lives. Complete in the sense that their story unfolded exactly as it needed to, even if it ended sooner or differently than anyone expected. A landlord sees this more clearly than the people living inside the story. Renters often think in terms of what went wrong, what changed, what drifted, what could have been different. But the landlord standing at the edge of the emotional landscapes sees the whole arc. The beginning, when strangers become companions. The middle, when routines form and the home feels full. The shift, when life pulls people in different directions. The ending, when the temporary family dissolves. The aftershocks, when the home adjusts to the silence. The renewal, when new renters arrive and new chapters begin. From this vantage point, you begin to understand something universal. Temporary family does not need to last to be meaningful, does not need to stay intact to have value, does not need to end neatly to be complete. Its completeness comes from the fact that it existed at all. Two people shared a home, they shared routines, they shared culture, they shared a moment in their lives when they were still becoming who they would eventually be. That moment, that chapter was whole. Even if it ended quietly, even if it ended unevenly, even if it ended with one person moving forward and the other staying behind, even if it ended without closure, this completeness is not the ending. It's in the living. The landlord does this because you're not inside. A landlord sees this because you're not inside the emotional turbulence. You're not a part of the friendship. You're not a part of the drift. You're not part of the departure. You're the witness. The witnessing gives you a kind of emotional distance or reveals the shape of the story without being pulled into its details. You see, the same temporary families are loud and lively. Some are quiet and steady. Some are deeply bounded. Some are loosely connected. Some dissolve gently. Some dissolve abruptly. But all of them are complete, because completeness is not about duration, it's not about intensity, it's not about symmetry, it's about presence. The presence of two people sharing a space, shaping each other in small ways, learning from each other, then moving on when life requires it. The landlord eventually understands that trying to interpret or intervene would only disrupt the natural arc of the story. The beauty of a temporary family lies in its autonomy, its ability to form, evolve, and dissolve without external influence. And the landlord's role is to honor this autonomy, to let the story unfold, to let the chapter complete itself, to let the renters grow in their own direction, to let the house reset for the next beginning. This understanding brings a kind of peace, a peace of knowing that nothing was missing, nothing was broken, nothing was incomplete. This chapter is exactly what it needed to be. And when it ended in a way temporary families always do, quietly, naturally, without fanfare, not because something went wrong, but because the story had reached its natural conclusion. Releasing the chapter without holding the weight. There is a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when the landlord realizes that a chapter has fully closed. Not because the room is empty, not because the renter is left, not because the silence has settled, but because the emotional residue has lifted. This is the moment when the landlord understands the deeper discipline of hosting. You must release each chapter without carrying its emotional weight into the next one. This release is not forgetfulness. It's not detachment. It's not a dismissal. It's respect. Respect for the renters who lived this chapter. Respect for the home that held it. Respect for the next people who will arrive and create something entirely different. Because if a landlord holds on to emotional imprint of one temporary family too tightly, a house becomes heavy, weighted with comparisons, expectations, or unexpected echoes of what once was. And a home cannot welcome new beginnings if it's still crowded with the old endings. So the landlord learns to release, to let the chapter stand on its own, to let the memories settle into the walls without clinging to them, to let the emotional atmosphere reset, to let the home breathe again. This release is a skill, one that grows stronger with each cycle of hosting. You learn that the laughter of the previous renters does not belong to the next ones. The routines of the old temporary family should not shape the new one. The emotional shift of the past chapters are not warnings for the future. The silence left behind is not a void to be filled, but a space to be respected. The home must be allowed to become neutral again. And in this neutrality, the landlord finds clarity. You stop repaying the dynamics of the previous renters. You stop wondering what could have been different. You stop interpreting the emotional residue of something to solve. You stop carrying the weight of transition that were never yours. Instead, you let the chapter rest. Not erased, not forgotten, simply, gently placed in the past where it belongs. This release is not emotional avoidance. It's not avoiding anything. It's emotional hygiene. It keeps the home light. It keeps the landlord grounded. It keeps the next chapter free from the shadows of the past. And it teaches the landlord something universal. You can honor a chapter without holding on to it. You can appreciate what happened without needing to continue. You can care about people without carrying their story forward. You can let go without losing anything essential. Because what is essential remains. The wisdom gained, the understanding deepened, the perspective widened, the quiet generosity strengthened. These things stay with the landlord, but the emotional specifics, the weight, they don't. This is the discipline that allows hosting to remain sustainable. This is the boundary that keeps the home open. This is the clarity that keeps the landlord steady. This is the respect that always allowed each temporary family to be its own complete story. And when the next renter arrives with their own histories, their own rhythms, their own uncertainties, the home is ready. Not haunted by what came before, not shaped by old dynamics, not carrying emotional residue, open, neutral, steady, ready, because the landlord has learned the quiet art of releasing each chapter so the next one can begin.
In the quiet of the night, shadows call my name. Whispers of a love that faded, nothing is the same. Memories, they linger like ghosts within my mind. In the echoes of the past, your heart I try to find. Tears fall like rain in this empty room. Every note of sorrow haunting tune. Loneliness, my only friend in the silence of my heart. Since you've gone away, everything's torn apart. The stars up in the sky, they used to shine so bright. Now they're just a reminder of the darkest night. I wander through the moments, lost without your touch, longing for the days when we loved so much. Tears fall like rain in this empty room. Every note of sorrow a haunting tune. Loneliness, my only friend in the silence of my heart. Since you've gone away, everything's torn apart. If I could turn back time, I'd hold you close again. But now I'm left with shadows and an endless rain. In the stillness, your voice is just a distant sound, a memory that fades as the darkness comes around. Time moves slowly like a river running dry. The colors of the world fade to a grayscale sky. I trace the lines of our love in the tears that fall. Each drop a reminder of the rise rise and the fall. Tears fall like rain in this empty room. Every note of sorrow a haunting tune. Loneliness my only friend in the silence of my heart. Since you've gone away, everything's torn apart. If I could turn back time, I'd hold you close again. But now I'm left with shadows and an endless rain. In the stillness, your voice is just a distant sound, a memory that fades as the darkness comes around. In the quiet of the night, shadows call my name. Whispers of a love that faded, nothing is the same. I'll carry this heartache through the endless days, hoping for a moment when the pain will fade away.
Okay, next section. Hosting as a long practice in witnessing growth. Over time, hosting becomes something more than a practical arrangement. It becomes a long-term practice, a way of seeing people, a way of understanding impermanence, a way of recognizing the quiet rhythms of human growth. Not because the landlord is deeply involved, not because the landlord is emotionally central, not because the landlord shapes the story, but because the landlord witnesses. And witnessing, when done over many years, becomes its own kind of education. You begin to see patterns that people never see, or seldom do. How young adults arrive unsure of themselves, how they cling to familiar routines when life feels overwhelming. How they slowly expand into their new environment, how friendships form unexpectedly, how cultural comfort becomes both an anchor and a shield, how emotional shifts happen quickly, long before anyone speaks them aloud. How departures are rarely about conflict and almost always about timing. How resilience grows in silence, not spectacle. You see these things not because you're inside the story, but because you're outside it. Steady, observant, unentangled. And this is the vantage point that teaches you something about life. Growth is rarely visible to the person experiencing it, but is unmistakable to the person watching it from the edges. You see renters arrive with uncertainty in their posture and leave with steadiness they didn't have before. You see them struggle with loneliness and then build routines that make the home feel safe. You see them navigate cultural adjustment and then carry themselves with confidence into the next place that once self felt foreign. You see them form bonds, drift apart, rebuild, and eventually step into the next chapter of their lives. And through all of this, you begin to understand that hosting is not about providing shelter. It's about providing a stable backdrop against which people can grow. A backdrop that does not interfere, a backdrop that does not interpret, a backdrop that does not absorb the emotional turbulence, a backdrop that remains steady even when the people living in the home are not. This steadiness is not glamorous, it's not dramatic, it's not emotionally loud. It's quiet, it's consistent, it's deeply human. And over time, the landlord becomes someone who understands impermanence not as a loss, but as a natural rhythm of shared living. You learn that people are meant to come and go. Chapters are meant to open and close. Temporary families are meant to dissolve. Silence is meant to reset the home. New renters are meant to bring new energy. The home is meant to breathe through each transition. You learn that nothing stays the same, and that this is not something to resist, but something to accept. Because hosting is not about holding on to people, it's about holding the space where people can become who they are becoming. And when you witness enough of these transformations, you see the beauty in the impermanence. The home is a vessel, the landlord is the steward, the renters are the story, and growth is constant. Not your growth, not their growth alone, but the shared growth that happens when lives intersect briefly, change each other subtly, and then move on. This is the long practice of hosting, a practice of witnessing, of releasing, of resetting, of welcoming, of understanding that every chapter is temporary and every chapter is meaningful. The emotional cycles of a home mirror the cycles of a home mirror the cycles of life. After witnessing enough renters come and go, enough temporary families form and dissolve, enough chapters open and close, the landlord begins to see something deeper. The emotional cycles inside the shared home are the same cycles that shaped every human life. Not similar, not metaphorically connected, identical. Because what happens in a home, the arrivals, the adjustments, the bonds, the drifting, the departures, the renewal, is simply a smaller version of what happens everywhere in the world. A shared home becomes a microcosm of life itself. People enter our lives, people shape us, people drift away, people leave, new people arrive, new dynamics form, new chapters begin. And through it all, we all learn to adapt. We learn to let go, we learn to welcome, we learn to reset, we learn to grow, we learn to accept impermanence as the natural rhythm of being human. The landlord sees the cycle play out again and again, not in theory, not in abstraction, but in the everyday reality of hosting. You see how beginnings are filled with uncertainty, middles are filled with routine, endings are filled with quiet shifts, transition are filled with emotional residue, renewals are filled with possibility. And as you begin to understand that none of this is random, is the same pattern that shapes friendships, relationships, careers, families, communities, everything. The home simply makes the pattern visible. Because in a shared home, the cycles happen quickly. They happen clearly. They happen in a confined space where emotional weather is easier to observe. You see how many people cling to familiarity when they're afraid. You see how they expand when they feel safe. You see how they retreat when they're overwhelmed. You see how they drift apart when their paths diverge. You see how they rebuild when they are ready. You see how they move on when life calls them forward. And you begin to understand something universal. Impermanence is not a disruption of life. It is life. The home teaches you a lesson gently, repeatedly, without ever speaking a word. It shows you nothing stays the same. Nothing is meant to. Change is not a threat. Endings are not failures. Departures are not losses. Silence is not emptiness. Renewal is not replacement. It shows that you had emotional cycles of a home. It shows you that the emotional cycles of a home are simply the emotional cycles of being human, condensed into a smaller space and a shorter timeline. And the landlord, standing at the edge of these cycles, begins to see impermanence, not as something to resist, but as something to respect. Because the home does not cling, the home does not mourn, the home does not compare, the home does not fear change. The home simply adapts. It absorbs what was, it releases what ended, it prepares for what comes next. And in this, the home becomes a quieter teacher. It teaches the landlord that stability is not the absence of change, it is the ability to remain grounded through change. It teaches that caring for people does not require holding on to them. It teaches that witnessing is its own form of participation. It teaches that letting go is not losing, it is making space. And it teaches that every chapter, no matter how brief, is part of a larger rhythm that continues long after the renters have moved on. This is the emotional truth that the landlord eventually understands. Cycles inside the home are cycles inside every life, and learning to accept them is learning to live with clarity, steadiness, and grace. Meaning found in continuity, not permanence. Eventually, after enough cycles of hosting, the landlord begins to understand something subtle but profound. The meaning of hosting does not come from the permanence of relationships, it comes from the continuity of offering a home. Not from being remembered, not from being central, not from being part of the renter's emotional story, but from being the steady presence that makes their story possible. This continuity becomes its own kind of purpose. You provide a space where people can land during uncertain years. You offer stability when everything else in their life is shifting. You maintain a home that becomes a backdrop for friendships, growth, and transition. You witness the beginnings and endings of temporary families without needing to shape them. And over time, you realize that this quiet contribution matters, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. Because the world is full of people who need a place to begin, a place to adjust to a new country, a place to study, a place to work, a place to figure out who they are, a place to experience independence for the first time, a place to form friendships that may last or dissolve, a place to grow through awkward, uncertain, transformative years of early adulthood. And the landlord provides that place, not as a mentor, not as a parent, not as a friend, not as a central figure, as a constant. A quiet, reliable constant. This constancy becomes meaningful in a way that permanence never could. Because permanence demands attachment, continuity demands commitment. Permanence asks you to hold on. Continuity asks you to show up. Permanence ties your identity to the people who pass through your life. Continuity ties your identity to the role you played in the world. And the landlord's role, though often overlooked, is deeply human. You create a space where people can become themselves. You don't shape their growth. Excuse me. You don't direct their choices. You don't intervene in their dynamics. You don't absorb their emotional turbulence. You simply provide the environment where their transformation can unfold. And that's enough. It's more than enough. Because meaning does not always come from being part of someone's story. Sometimes it comes from being grounded and the ground they stood while writing it. This continuity becomes a kind of quiet legacy, not the legacy of names and memories, not a legacy of emotional closeness, not a legacy of being remembered, a legacy of contribution, a legacy of offering stability to people who needed it, a legacy of witnessing growth without claiming it, a legacy of providing a home where many small human stories unfold, a legacy of being a steady presence in a world full of transitions. And the landlord eventually understands you don't need to be permanent in anyone's life to make a meaningful impact. You only need to keep the home open, steady, and welcoming, one chapter at a time. This is the quiet dignity of hosting. This is the meaning found in continuity. This is the contribution that lasts, even when the people do not. Becoming comfortable with emotional distance. With time, the landlord begins to settle into a truth that once felt familiar. Emotional distance is not a barrier. It is a boundary that keeps the home healthy. At first, this distance can feel strange. It can feel like something is missing, as if a landlord should be more involved, more connected, more emotionally invested in the renters' lives. But hosting teaches a different lesson. It teaches that closeness is not required for care. It teaches that involvement is not a requirement for support. It teaches that presence is not measured by emotional entanglement. And slowly the landlord becomes comfortable with this distance, not resigned, not detached, not indifferent, just comfortable. Because the landlord begins to understand that emotional distance is what allows the home to remain neutral, steady, safe, welcoming, adaptable, and open to new beginnings. Without this distance, the home will become heavy, weighted with old dynamics, old expectation, old emotional residue. Without this distance, the landlord will become overwhelmed, carrying burdens that were never theirs to carry. Without this distance, the renters would feel watched, unable to navigate their own emotional world freely. So the landlord is to embrace this boundary. You learn to care without absorbing. You learn to observe without interpreting. You learn to support without stepping inside the story. You learn to maintain the home without maintaining the renter's emotions. This boundary becomes a kind of quiet strength. It allows you to remain steady even when the renters are not. It allows you to remain neutral even when the atmosphere shifts. It allows you to remain grounded even when the temporary family dissolves. It allows you to remain open even when the home feels empty. And eventually the landlord realizes something universal. Emotional distance is not the absence of care. It is a form of care that respects autonomy. It says, I will give you space to live your life, and I will not make your journey about me. It says, I will keep the home steady so that you can navigate your own instability. It says, I will be present, but I will not intrude. This boundary becomes quite the quiet architect of hosting. Sorry about that. It is what allows the home to reset after each chapter. It is what allows new renters to arrive without inheriting old emotional weight. It is what allows the landlord to continue offering a home without burning out. It is what allows the temporary family to form naturally without interference. And once the landlord becomes comfortable with this distance, hosting becomes lighter. Not emotionally empty, emotionally balanced. Not detached, appropriately separate. Not cold, quietly respectful. This comfort allows the landlord to move through each cycle with clarity, welcoming without expectation, witnessing without absorbing, releasing without regret, resetting without hesitation. And in this clarity, the landlord discovers the deeper truth, which is emotional distance is not the opposite of connection. It is the condition that allows connection to remain healthy, temporary, and free. The home stays open, the landlord stays steady, the renters stay autonomous, the chapters stay self-contained, and the cycle of shared living continues, not weighed down by the past, ready for whatever comes next. The home as an emotional landscape. Over time, the landlord begins to see the home not just as a physical structure, but as an emotional landscape, a place shaped by the people who pass through it, yet never defined by any single chapter. This landscape is subtle, it's not dramatic, it's not sentimental, it's not loud, but it is layered. Each renter leaves behind a trace, not a burden, not a ghost, not a temporary, not a memory that clings, but a trace. A shift in the atmosphere, a rhythm in the way the home breathes, a faint echo of the routines that once filled the space, a softness or stillness of warmth that lingers for a moment before dissolving into neutrality. The home absorbs these traces the way a forest absorbs footsteps, briefly, gently, without ever losing its shape. And the landlord, witnessing this, begins to understand a home is not static. It's a living environment shaped by human presence. Not in a mystical way, in a human way. Because people bring energy with them, their habits, their culture, their environmental weather, their way of moving through the world. And when they leave, the home shifts again. Not because something is missing, but because something new is possible. This is what makes the home an emotional landscape. It expands when the renters feel connected. It quiets when they drift. It steadies when they settle. It resets when they leave. It opens when new people arrive. The home reflects the emotional state of the people living in it, but it does not hold on to any single state. It adapts, it adjusts, it breathes. and the landlord learns to read these shifts without interpreting them. You learn to sense when the home feels full. You learn to sense when the home feels quiet. You learn to sense when the home is in transition. You learn to sense when the home is ready for renewal. But you do not assign meaning to these sensations. You do not turn them into stories. You do not take them personally. You simply observe the landscape as it changes. This is the emotional neutrality of the home. Not coldness, not emptiness, not capacity. The capacity to hold many stories without being defined by any one of them. The capacity to welcome new renters without comparing them to the old ones. The capacity to reset without erasing what came before. The capacity to remain open, steady, and adaptable. And the landlord, standing in this landscape, eventually understands something universal. The home is shaped by the people who pass through it. Let me say it again. A home is shaped by the people who pass through it, but it belongs to no one's story. It is the backdrop, not the narrative. It is the container, not the content. It is the environment, not the emotion. This is what makes the home resilient. It does not cling, it does not resist change, it does not hold on to the past, it does not fear the future. It simply remains steady, neutral, open, ready for the next chapter. The landlord learns to mirror this resilience. You learn to let the home shift without trying to preserve what once was. You learn to welcome new renters without expecting familiar dynamics. You learn to release old chapters without carrying their emotional residue. You learn to see the home as a landscape that changes naturally, not as a space that must be controlled. And in this understanding, hosting becomes lighter, not emotionally distanced, but emotionally balanced. Because the home teaches you that the beauty of shared living lies not in permanence, but in the gentle, continuous reshaping of the emotional landscape as new people arrive, new stories unfold, and new chapters begin. The value in the long arc of many chapters. At first, hosting feels like a series of isolated experiences. One renter leaves, another arrives. One temporary family dissolves, another forms. One chapter ends, another begins. But over time, after enough cycles, enough transitions, enough quiet resets, the landlord begins to see something larger. The value of hosting is not found in any single chapter. It is found in the long arc of many chapters layered together. No one chapter defines the home. No one renter defines the experience. No one temporary family defines the atmosphere. It's the accumulation that matters. The accumulation of voices that once filled the kitchen. Routines that briefly shaped the rhythm of the home. Cultural habits that added texture to the space. Emotional shifts that passed through like weather. Departures that left the home quiet for a moment. Arrivals that brought new energy. Stories that unfolded without your involvement. Growth that happened quietly in the background. Each chapter is small in its own, but together they form something meaningful, a long, slow layering of human experience that subtly shapes the landlord. Not dramatically, not emotionally, not in a way that demands attention, in a grounded, steady, cumulative way. You begin to understand people differently. You begin to understand impermanence differently. You begin to understand boundaries differently. You begin to understand growth differently. Because hosting exposes you to many versions of the same human truths. People are uncertain when they arrive. People adapt when given space. People grow in uneven rhythms. People drift when their paths diverge. People leave when life calls them forward. People carry the chapter with them. People rarely realize how much they changed while living in your home. In witnessing this repeatedly, not once, not twice, but dozens of times, creates a kind of quiet wisdom that cannot be turned away or learned in any other way. It teaches you that connection does not require permanence. Care does not require closeness. Meaning does not require being central. Stability does not require emotional involvement. Letting go is not losing. Renewal is not replacement. Neutrality is not emptiness. Distance is not coldness. It teaches you that your role is not to shape the story, but to hold the space where the story can unfold. Then over the long arc of many chapters, you begin to see hosting as a series of temporary arrangements, but as a long-term contribution to the world. A contribution made quietly, steadily, without fanfare. You provide a home where people can grow. You provide stability during uncertain years. You provide a backdrop for transformation. You provide a neutral space where many small human stories can unfold. And that meaning lies not in being remembered, but in having been part of the environment that allowed these stories to exist. This is the quiet reward of hosting. You become someone shaped not by one relationship, but by long, gentle accumulation of many human experiences passing through your home. Not attached, not entangled, not central, present, steady, witnessing, contributing. And in this long arc, the landlord discovers the truth that only emerges with time. The value of hosting is not in the intensity of any single chapter, but the continuity of offering a home again and again to people who are all becoming themselves. Okay. A home that looks forward, not backwards. Eventually, after enough cycles of hosting, the landlord begins to understand something essential about the purpose of a home. A home is not meant to preserve the past. A home is meant to remain open to the future. This realization arrives quietly, often after a moment of stillness, a morning when the house feels unusually calm, or in the evening when the silence feels rather close and empty. You look around and realize the home is not holding on to what happened here. It's not repaying old dynamics. It's not echoing old returns. It's not waiting for something to return. It is simply ready. Ready for new footsteps, ready for new voices, ready for new rhythms, ready for new stories that have nothing to do with the ones that came before. The readiness is not forgetfulness, it's not an erasure, it's not indifference, it's openness. The openness that allows a home to remain alive, the openness that allows new renters to feel welcome, the openness that allows the space to breathe again, the openness that allows the next chapter to unfold without being overshadowed by the last one. The landlord eventually learns to mirror this experience. You stop expecting the home to feel the way it used to. You stop comparing new renters to old ones. You stop looking for familiar patterns. You stop interpreting the atmosphere through the lens of what was. Instead, you let the home become what it needs to be now. You let the new renters reshape and shape the rhythm. You let the new routines define the atmosphere. You let the new chapter stand on its own. You let the home evolve naturally without trying to recreate anything. This shift is subtle, but it's profound. It means you no longer see the home as a container for memories, you see it as a container for possibility. It means you no longer hold onto the emotional residue of past chapters, you release it so the home can reset. It means you no longer view departures as losses, you view them as transitions that make space for new beginnings. It means you no longer feel the need to interpret the emotional weather. You simply let it pass through, knowing it will change again. And in this openness, the landlord discovers something universal. The purpose of the home is not to hold on to people, it is to welcome them, to support them, and let them go when their chapter ends. A home that clings becomes heavy. A home that compares becomes unfair. A home that preserves the past becomes stagnant. But a home that looks forward, a home that resets, adapts, and opens itself to new stories remains alive. It remains a place where people can grow. It remains a place where temporary families can form. It remains a place where transitions feel natural rather than disruptive. It remains a place where the landlord continue offering stability without emotional weight. This forward-looking posture becomes the quiet philosophy of hosting. Welcome fully, witness gently, release gracefully, reset completely, open again. And the landlord standing in this cycle begins to understand the home's purpose is not to preserve what happened, but to remain ready for what still will happen next. This readiness is not passive, it's not empty, it's not neutral in a cold way, it's hopeful. It is the hope that new renters will bring new energy. It is the hope that new routines will form naturally. The hope that the home will continue to be a place of growth. It is the hope that each chapter, no matter how brief, will be meaningful in some way. And this hope, quiet, steady, unspoken, is what keeps the home alive. Hosting is a quiet stewardship. In some point, after enough renters have passed through the home, after enough temporary families have formed and dissolved, after enough cycles of arrival, adjustment, departure, and renewal, the landlord begins to understand the deeper nature of their role. Hosting is not just a practical responsibility. Hosting is a quiet form of stewardship. Not stewardship in the grand dramatic sense, not stewardship that demands recognition or gratitude, not stewardship that places the landlord in the center of the story. A quieter stewardship, a steadier stewardship, a stewardship rooted in care for the space, not control over the people who live in it. Because the landlord is not responsible for the renters emotional lives. The landlord is responsible for the environment that supports those lives. You maintain the home so it can hold their routines. You keep the space steady so they can narrate their instability. You protect their privacy so they can grow without feeling observed. You respect their autonomy so they can form their own conclusions. You step back so they can step into their own story. This is stewardship. It is the stewardship of the atmosphere, the boundaries, the neutrality, the continuity, the safety, the quiet dignity of the home. It is the stewardship of space that becomes meaningful to others, even if they never fully understand the role you played in keeping it that way. And over time, the landlord begins to see that stewardship is not small, is not secondary, it is not peripheral, it is essential. Because without this quiet stewardship, the home would lose its neutrality, the renters would feel watched, the emotional residue would accumulate, the atmosphere would become heavy, the cycles of renewal would slow, the home would stop being a place where people can grow freely. Stewardship is what keeps the home alive. What allows the space to reset after each chapter is what allows new renters to arrive without inheriting old emotional weight, is what allows the landlord to remain steady without being entangled, is what allows the home to remain open to the future rather than anchored to the past. And the stewardship is not loud, it is not sentimental, it is not emotionally dramatic, it is quiet, consistent, grounded. It is the kind of contribution that rarely gets acknowledged, but always makes a difference. Because the renters may not remember the details of the home, but they will remember how it felt to live there. They will remember the stability. They will remember the safety. They will remember the sense of belonging, however temporary. They will remember the space that allowed them to grow, and the space existed because the landlord cared for it, not possessively, not emotionally, but responsibly. This is the heart of stewardship. You care for the home so others can care for their own lives. You maintain the environment so they can maintain their independence. You provide stability so they can navigate uncertainty. You offer neutrality so they can form their own emotional landscape. You step back so they can step forward. And in doing so, you become part of the story without ever needing to appear in it. This is the quiet dignity of hosting. This is the deeper purpose behind the role. This is the stewardship that keeps the home alive, chapter after chapter, year after year. Meaning in the long-term act of providing a place. Eventually the landlord begins to understand something that only becomes clear after many years of hosting. The emotional meaning of hosting does not come from the intensity of any single connection. It comes from the long-term act of providing a place where many lives can unfold safely and freely. This meaning is cumulative. It is built slowly, quietly, through repetition rather than intensity. Because hosting is not about forming deep bonds with renters, it is not about becoming part of their story. It is not about being remembered. It is about offering a home again and again to people in the middle of becoming themselves. And that act, repeated over time, becomes a kind of quiet contribution to the world. You provide a stable environment during unstable years. You offer a neutral space where people can grow without pressure. You maintain a home that becomes the backdrop for the friendships, routines, and transitions. You witness the unfolding of many small human stories without needing to shape them. This is not dramatic work. It's not emotionally loud. It's not kind of contribution that gets celebrated, but it does matter. It matters because people need places where they can land. It matters because young adults need stability while they're navigating uncertainty. It matters because growth requires a safe environment. It matters because temporary families need a home to form in. It matters because transitions need a place to unfold, and the landlord provides that space. Not as a central figure, not as an emotional anchor, not as a participant in the renter's story, as a steward of the environment where the story happens. This is where the meaning lies. Not in the renters themselves, but in the continuity of offering a home that supports them. Not in the emotional intensity of any single chapter, but in the long arc of many chapters layered together. Not in being remembered, but in having contributed something steady and human to the lives of people who are passing through. Over time, the landlord begins to see that this contribution is not small, it is not secondary, it is not peripheral, it is foundational. Because without this steady offering, the renters would not have a place to grow, the temporary families will not have a place to form, the transitions will not have a place to unfold, the emotional cycles will not have a place to breathe, the home would not have a purpose. And the landlord's role, though quiet, becomes meaningful in a way that permanence never could, because permanence ties meaning to a single relationship. Continuity ties meaning to a long-term contribution. Permanence asks, who stayed? Continuity asks, who grew here? Permanence looks backward. Continuity looks forward. Permanence is about holding on. Continuity is about showing up. And the landlord, standing in the long arc of many chapters, eventually understands the value of hosting is not about being a part of someone's story. It is providing a place where many stories can unfold. This is the quiet dignity of the role. This is the meaning that accumulates over time. This is not the contribution that lasts, even when people do not. Neutrality as openness, not emptiness. With time, the landlord begins to understand something that only becomes clear after many cycles of hosting. The emotional neutrality of the home is not emptiness. It is what allows the space to remain open, adaptable, and ready for each new chapter. Neutrality is often misunderstood. People assume neutrality means coldness, or distance, or lack of care, or absence of meaning. But in a shared home, neutrality is none of those things. Neutrality is capacity. Neutrality is flexibility. Neutrality is the ability to reset. Neutrality is the quiet strength that allows the home to welcome new renters without carrying the emotional residue of the past. The landlord eventually sees this neutrality is what keeps the home alive. Because if the home held on to every emotional imprint, every friendship, every drift, every departure, every silence, it would become heavy. It would become a museum of past dynamics. It would become a space to find what used to happen there. Become a place where new renters feel like guests in someone else's story. Neutrality prevents this. Neutrality clears the emotional state. Neutrality allows the home to breathe. Neutrality makes room for new routines. Neutrality gives each temporary family the freedom to form its own atmosphere. And the landlord, observing this, begins to understand neutrality is not a lack of emotion, but a form of respect. Respect for the renters who came before, respect for the renters who will come next, respect for the home itself. Neutrality says, this space is yours now. You don't have to inherit anything that came before you. Neutrality says, you are free to create your own rhythms here. Neutrality, the past is complete. The present is open. The openness is what makes the home feel alive rather than haunted, is what makes the home feel welcoming rather than nostalgic, is what makes the home feel adaptable rather than fixed. And the landlord eventually learns to embody this same neutrality. You stop interpreting the emotional atmosphere. You stop carrying the weight of past chapters. You stop expecting the home to feel the way it used to feel. You stop looking for echoes of old dynamics. Instead, you let the home be what it is now, a space shaped by the people currently living in it, not the people who once did. This neutrality becomes a kind of emotional discipline. It helps keep the landlord steady, keeps the home open, keeps the renters free, keeps the cycles of hosting sustainable. In this discipline, the landlord discovers something universal. Neutrality is not the absence of care. It is the form of care that allows the home to remain a place of renewal. Because a home that clings onto the past cannot welcome the future, a home that holds emotional residue cannot reset, a home that compares cannot adapt, a home that remembers too vividly cannot open itself to new stories. Neutrality is what allows the home to remain timeless, not stuck in any particular chapter, not shaped by any particular dynamic, not defined by any particular temporary family. It is what allows the home to remain ready. Ready for new footsteps, ready for new stories, ready for new routines, ready for new beginnings. And the landlord, standing in this openness, eventually understands neutrality is not emptiness. Neutrality is possibility. The quiet resilience learned through hosting. After enough cycles of hosting, the landlord begins to recognize a pattern, not in the renters, not in the temporary families, not in the emotional atmosphere of the home, but in themselves. A quiet resilience begins to form, not the dramatic kind, not the kind forged through crisis or conflict, not the kind that demands recognition, a softer resilience, steadier resilience, a resilience shaped by repetition, observation, and acceptance. Because hosting teaches you again and again that people arrive, people adjust, people connect, people drift, people leave, the home resets, the cycle begins again. And when you witness this rhythm enough times, you begin to move through change differently. You stop resisting transitions. You stop clinging to what the home used to feel like. You stop interpreting every shift as a sign of something deeper. You stop carrying emotional residue from one chapter to the next. Instead, you begin to move with a rhythm rather than against it. This is what quiet resilience of hosting is. The ability to remain steady while everything around you changes. Not unaffected, just not destabilized. Not detached, just not entangled. Not indifferent, just grounded. You learn to let the home breathe through each transition. You learn to let the renters navigate their own emotional world. You learn to let the temporary family dissolve without trying to preserve it. You learn to let silence settle without interpreting it as a loss. You learn to let the next chapter begin without hesitation. This resilience is not something you consciously build. It grows naturally, the way a tree strengthens through seasons. Because hosting exposes you to many small endings, not dramatic, not painful, just natural. And each ending teaches you that endings are not disruptions. They're part of the rhythm of life. You begin to understand that change is not a threat. Silence is not emptiness. Departure is not loss. Renewal is not replacement. Neutrality is not coldness. Distance is not disconnection. You begin to understand that the home is not meant to stay the same, and neither are you. The resilience becomes a kind of emotional posture, a way of standing in the world. You become someone who can witness change without being shaken by it. You become someone who can let go without feeling diminished. You become someone who can welcome new beginnings without comparing them to the past. You become someone who can remain steady without needing to be central. And this steadiness is not passive, it's not empty, it's not numb, it's clarity. Clarity about what belongs to you and what does not. Clarity about your role in the boundaries. Clarity about the difference between caring and carrying. Clarity about the rhythm of human connection. This quiet resilience is one of the unexpected gifts of hosting. You do not seek it. You do not chase it. You do not even realize it's forming until one day you notice a chapter ends and you do not feel the need to interpret it. A renter leaves. You don't feel the weight of their absence. A new renter arrives. You do not feel the need to recreate what once was. You simply move with the rhythm, steady, grounded, open. This is the resilience that makes hosting sustainable. This is the resilience that keeps the home active and alive. This is the resilience that allows the landlord to continue offering a place where many lives can unfold freely. And it is a resilience learned not through intensity, but through the quiet repetition of letting go, resetting, and beginning again. The home is a mirror for life outside the home. That's a good one. At some point, after witnessing enough cycles of hosting, the landlord begins to notice something unexpected. The emotional patterns inside the home start to mirror the emotional patterns of life outside the home. Not because the landlord is projecting, not because the home is symbolic, not because hosting is some kind of metaphor, but because the rhythms of a shared home are simply the rhythms of being human, compressed into a smaller space and shorter timeline. Inside the home, the landlord sees arrivals, adjustments, connections, drift, silence, departure, renewal. Outside the home, the landlord sees new jobs, new friendships, new routines, slow changes in direction, quiet endings, new beginnings. The home becomes kind of a mirror, not reflecting the landlord's emotions, but reflecting the universal patterns of change that shape every life. This mirror teaches the landlord something subtle. The way you move transmissions in a home is the way you can move through transitions everywhere else. You learn to let things begin without overthinking them. You learn to let things end without clinging. You learn to let silence exist without interpreting it as a loss. You learn to let new chapters unfold without comparing them to the past. You learn to let people drift without assuming it means something about you. You learn to let renewal happen naturally without forcing it. There are no lessons about hosting. There are lessons about living, because the home shows you again and again that change is normal, drift is natural, endings are not failures, beginnings do not need justification, silence is not emptiness, neutrality is not coldness, distance is not rejection, and renewal is not replacement. And once you see these truths clearly inside the home, you begin to recognize them everywhere else. You begin to move through your own life with the same steadiness you bring to hosting. You stop taking every shift personally. You stop interpreting every silence as a sign. You stop expecting permanence from things that were never meant to be permanent. You stop resisting transitions that are simply part of the rhythm. You stop holding on to chapters that have already completed themselves. Instead, you begin to live with a kind of quiet acceptance. People come and go. Chapters open and close. Routines form and dissolve. Atmospheres shift. Life resets. And then it begins again. It's not resignation. It's not detachment. It's not emotional distance in the cold sense. It's just clarity. Clarity allows you to move through your own life with the same grounded neutrality that keeps the home steady. You begin to understand not every drift needs explanation, not every ending needs closure, not every silence needs filling, not every change needs resistance, not every departure needs interpretation. You begin to trust the rhythm. The rhythm says, let things begin, let things unfold, let things shift, let things end, let things reset, let things begin again. The home teaches this rhythm quietly, without instruction, without philosophy, without emotional weight. It reaches through repetition, it teaches through observation, it teaches through the simple fact that life inside the home moves the very same way life outside the home does. And the landlord, seeing this clearly, eventually understands. Hosting is not just about providing a place for others to grow. It's about learning how to move through your own life with steadiness, clarity, and acceptance. The home becomes a mirror, not reflecting who you are, but reflecting how life works. And once you see that, you begin to live with a little more sense, a little more openness, a little more resilience, a little more trust in the natural rhythm of beginnings and endings. The emotional maturity that hosting quietly develops. There comes a point after years of hosting when a landlord realizes that something subtle has been happening all along. Hosting has been developing an emotional maturity that is not dramatic, not sentimental, not loud, but deeply steady. This maturity doesn't come from intensity, doesn't come from closeness, doesn't come from being part of the renter's emotional world. It comes from witnessing, from observing many small human stories unfold, from seeing patterns repeat without needing to intervene, without learning to let things happen and end without resistance, from understanding that impermanence is not a flaw, it's the natural rhythm. The emotional maturity is not about becoming wiser in a philosophical sense. It's about becoming clearer in a practical, grounded way. You begin to understand when to step back, when to stay neutral, when to stay silent, when to let people drift without interpreting it, when to let a chapter end without trying to preserve it, when to welcome new renters without comparing them to the old ones. This is not emotional detachment, it's emotional clarity. Clarity that says, I do care. I can care about what happens here without needing to be part of it. A clarity that says, I can witness change without being destabilized by it. A clarity that says, I can offer stability without absorbing anyone's emotional weight. This maturity grows slowly, almost invisibly. It grows each time a renter arrives with uncertainty. It grows each time a temporary family forms naturally. It grows each time the atmosphere shifts without explanation. It grows each time someone leaves quietly. It grows each time the home resets. It grows each time the new chapter begins. And eventually the landlord realizes you no longer react to change. You respond to it. You're no longer clinging to what a home used to feel like. You let it evolve. You no longer interpret every emotional shift. You let it pass through. You no longer feel responsible for the renter's dynamics. You respect their autonomy. You no longer fear the silence after someone leaves. You recognize it as a natural clearing before renewal. The emotional maturity is not about becoming hardened. It's not about becoming distant. It is about becoming indifferent. It's not about becoming indifferent. It's about becoming steady. Steady in the face of change. Steady in the face of uncertainty. Steady in the face of endings. Steady in the face of renewal. Hosting teaches this because hosting requires it. A landlord who clings becomes overwhelmed. A landlord who interprets becomes entangled. A landlord who absorbs becomes exhausted. A landlord who resists change becomes stuck. But a landlord who develops emotional maturity, quiet, grounded, steady maturity, can host for years without losing themselves. This maturity eventually extends beyond the home. You begin to move through your own life with the same steadiness, letting relationships shift without panic, letting routines change without resistance, letting chapters end without dramatizing them, letting new beginnings unfold without fear, letting silence exist without assuming it means something's wrong. You begin to understand that emotional security and emotional maturity is not about controlling life, it's about moving with it. And hosting, in its quiet, repetitive way, teaches you exactly that. It teaches you to trust the rhythm. It teaches you to accept impermanence. It teaches you to remain grounded. It teaches you to let go gracefully. It teaches you to welcome without expectation. It teaches you to release without regret. It teaches emotional maturity, and that develops through the intensity, but through the long, steady exposure to human change. The home is a living continuum. After many years of hosting, the landlord begins to see the home in a new way, not as a backdrop for isolated chapters, not as a container for temporary stories, not as a place defined by whoever happened to live there at any given moment. The home becomes something larger. It becomes a living continuum. Not alive in any mystical sense, alive in the human sense, shaped by presence, shaped by absence, shaped by rhythm, shaped by renewal. The home is no longer understood as a series of disconnected experiences. It becomes a long, unfolding line of human lives passing through, each one leaving a trace, each one contributing to the atmosphere, each one becoming part of the home's quiet history. But no single chapter defines it. This is the essence of continuation, or continuum. It stretches backward without clinging. It stretches forward without expectation. It holds many stories without being owned by any one of them. It remains open to what comes next. It respects and resets without erasing. It aims without losing itself. The landlord begins to see that the home has its own kind of identity, not fixed, not sentimental, not tied to any particular group of renters. A flexible identity, a steady identity, an identity shaped by the long arc of many chapters layered together. The identity is built from the routines that once filled the kitchen, the quiet mornings after someone moved out, the laughter that echoed through the hallway for a season, the silence that followed, the new footsteps that arrived weeks later, the cultural habits that briefly shaped the rhythm of the home, the departures that left the air still, departures that brought new energy. None of these moments define the home, all of them contribute to it. This is what makes the home a continuum. It's always becoming, never fixed, never finished. The landlord begins to understand that the home is not meant to stay the same. It is meant to evolve, gently, naturally, without resistance. And this evolution is not chaotic. It's not unpredictable. It's not devastating. It's not debilitating. It follows a rhythm of natural adjustment, connected through drift, a rhythm of arrival, adjustment, connection, drift, departure, reset, renewal. A rhythm is the heartbeat of the home. It's what keeps the space alive, is what keeps the atmosphere fresh, is what keeps the landlord grounded, what keeps the home open to new stories. And the landlord, witnessing this long continuum, eventually understands the home is not defined by who lives in it. It is defined by its capacity to welcome, hold, and release many lives over time. This capacity is what gives the home its quiet dignity, its quiet purpose, its quiet meaning, because the home does not cling to the past, does not fear the future, it does not compare one chapter to another, does not interpret emotional shifts, does not hold on to residue. It simply continues. It continues through silence, continues through renewal, continues through change, continues through uncertainty. It continues through the long arc of human presence. And the landlord standing in this continuum begins to feel something unexpected, a sense of peace. A peace in knowing that the home does not need to be preserved in any particular emotional state. Peace knowing that each chapter is complete in itself. Peace knowing that the home will continue to evolve long after each renter has moved on. Peace in knowing that the landlord's role is not to shape the continuum, but to steward it. This is the quiet truth that emerges. A shared home is not a collection of memories. It is a living continuum of human experience, always changing, always resetting, always ready for what comes next. The landlord's quiet legacy. After many years of hosting, the landlord eventually come to understand something that was never obvious at the beginning. The legacy of hosting is not emotional, it's not personal. It's not tied to any single renter or any single chapter. It is found in the long-term act of providing a place where many people could grow. The legacy is quiet, it's cumulative. It is built slowly through repetition rather than intensity. It does not come from being remembered, does not come from forming deep bonds, does not come from being central to anyone's story. It comes from the steady contribution of offering a home, again and again, to people who needed stability during uncertain years. This contribution is not dramatic, it's not sentimental, not emotionally found, but it matters. It matters because people need a place to land, people need a place to adjust, people need a place to grow, people need a place to form temporary families, excuse me, people need a place to transition into the next chapter of their lives. And the landlord provides this place, not as a mentor, not as a parent, not as a friend, not as a central figure, as a steward of the environment where growth can happen. This is the landlord's quiet legacy. You created a space where many lives could unfold safely, freely, and without interference. You offered stability without demanding closeness. You offered neutrality without withdrawing care. You offered boundaries without creating distance. You offered continuity without clinging to any particular chapter. And because of this, the home became a place where friendships formed, confidence grew, independence developed, cultural adjustment became easier, emotional resilience took shape, transitions felt manageable, young adults became more fully themselves. None of this is credited to the landlord, nor should it be. The renters did the growing, the renters lived the stories, the renters shaped the atmosphere, but the landlord created the conditions that made it possible. This is the essence of a quiet legacy. You make a difference without needing to be seen, you contribute without needing to be central. You support without needing to be remembered, and over time, the landlord begins to understand this kind of legacy is not small, it's not secondary, it's not peripheral, it's foundational. Because the world is full of people who need a place to begin, a place that is stable, a place that is neutral, a place that is safe, a place that is steady, a place that allows them to grow without pressure. And the landlord provided that place, not once, not twice, but over and over, for many years. This is the legacy that accumulates quietly. The home maintained open, the home remained steady, the home remained adaptable, the home remained welcoming, the home remained a place where growth could happen. And the landlord, looking back, eventually sees the meaning of hosting was never in the intensity of any single connection. It was a long-term act of offering a home where many small human stories could unfold. This is the quiet dignity of the role. This is the contribution that lasts. This is the legacy that remains even when the people do not. The conclusion, the rhythm of letting go and beginning again. After many years of hosting, after many cycles of arrival, departure, after many temporary families forming and dissolving, after many quiet resets and renewals, the landlord finally understands the deep truth that has been unfolding all along. The shared home teaches the rhythm of life itself, the rhythm of letting go and beginning again. The rhythm is not dramatic, it's not sentimental, it's not emotional in the loud sense. Steady, natural, it's human. Because every chapter inside the home follows the same pattern. Someone arrives, someone adjusts, someone grows, someone drifts, someone leaves, the home resets. Someone new arrives. And this pattern repeats, not as a cycle of loss, but as a cycle of renewal. The landlord eventually sees that nothing is meant to stay the same. Not the atmosphere, not the routines, not the temporary families, not the emotional landscape. Everything shifts, everything evolves, everything completes itself, everything begins again. And instead of resisting this rhythm, the landlord learns to move with it. You learn to welcome without expectation. You learn to witness without absorbing. You learn to support without intervening. You learn to release without regret. You learn to reset without hesitation. You learn to open the home again without fear of comparison. It's not emotional detachment, it's emotional steadiness. A steadiness, let me turn this down a little bit. A steadiness that comes from understanding that endings are not failures, departures are not losses, silence is not emptiness, neutrality is not coldness, distance is not disconnection. I have to turn this down a little bit more. Renewal is not replacement. It's simply the natural rhythm of human life made visible inside the walls of a shared home. And once the landlord sees this clearly, something shifts internally. You begin to trust the rhythm. You begin to accept impermanence. You begin to let go of the need to interpret every emotional shift. You begin to understand each chapter is complete in itself. You begin to recognize the home's purpose is not to preserve the past, but to remain open to the future. This understanding becomes kind of a quiet wisdom, a wisdom learned not through intensity, but through long-term exposure to human change. A wisdom that says, let things begin, let things unfold, let things shift, let things end, let things reset, let things begin again. This is the rhythm of a home. This is the rhythm of hosting. This is the rhythm of life. And the landlord standing in this rhythm finally understands the meaning of hosting is not found in holding on. It's found in offering a place where many lives can pass through. Growth for a while and move on. While the home remains steady, neutral, open, and ready for whatever comes next. This is the quiet dignity of the role. This is the legacy that lasts. This is the conclusion. The home teaches gently, repeatedly, without ever speaking a word. The rhythm continues. The home remains. And the next chapter is already on its way. Now you need to know to whom I refer for help, which you always freely gave. Like I said again, N, I can't use the full name. N, you know to whom I refer when I say thanks for all the help which you always gave freely. Thank you for the fun and joy of which you brought to this little family. I will never forget you. I will never forget you. I will always look to the future, but I will never forget the past and the present, that you were here and you're still here, not that far away. You're now a part of my soul, and philosophically, whether that's good or not, I don't really care. You are a part. Your contribution was wonderful. So I wish you good luck in your journey through life. I know that you'll be highly successful, and I know it sounds trite, but make us proud. R, you know who you are, the peacemaker. You're always there to make peace and resolve differences. You have not found your career job yet, but be patient. It will happen as fate will have it. Try not to be too sad at N's departure. I know that's brutally difficult, and I too find I hurt. It bothers me immensely that N has left, but N has to leave. She's not here to work at some part-time job that has little meaning. She's here to make a major career. So she's going to do well, and she's going to make waves, as will you. So what do they say? Everything comes to those who wait. Hang in there. Your career job will materialize. Keep plugging away. Don't be too depressed that N's not here. You've got to just keep going. And if you decide to leave, that's perfectly fine. I'm good with it. But think clearly before you do. I'm old. I just want to help everyone, and in the end, everyone have to do their own thing. It's sad actually, but this is life. Everyone leaves. This is not their solar system. This is just part of the path they have to continue. And so, to the handful of readers who made it this far, yes, the opening was a bait and switch, a misdirect, a hook. People love to imagine that shared homes are full of secrets and whispered stories, so I use that expansion to draw you in, all 5 of you. So maybe there'll be 6 after this one, or maybe less. But the truth is simple. Nothing happened. This house has always been very respectful, steady, decent. Everyone who lives here or has lived here has been treated with dignity, respect. Their privacy was respected. As far as I know, there were no scandals, no secrets, no drama. Just ordinary people trying to build their lives and acquire higher education. The real purpose of this home has always been the same: to provide a safe, comfortable environment where people can grow, adjust, move forward, have some fun. The people who live here, whether it's not necessary, but we help each other when we can. We accept small imperfections, or big ones. We try to be kind, supportive, and good to each other. That's the whole truth. Nothing ever happened. Sure, we've had our ups and downs, but our being the peacemaker has always made sense of everything, and we remained together for a long period of time. And the renters who passed through this home, they still are, some of the best people I've ever met. They are international students, and if there is a landlord, like I say, there's only 5 or 6 people that watch this, so, but if there is a landlord who ever watched this, don't hesitate to rent a room to an international student. Sure, be selective, do your due diligence, but in the end, these are great people. They're not here to cause trouble. They're only here to get advanced degrees and to start their careers, not jobs, careers. So we were together for a long enough period of time that we became fairly comfortable with each other, as far as we helped each other when we could. We shared things when we could. We tried to have a little bit of fun together. But it is clear. The other 3 girls, I'm not really part of their group. Look, I'm an old man. I've got 1 foot in the grave already, if not close to 2, and they're just all young people. So, but they were always very kind and supportive. If I need a little bit of help, they're always there to help, and that's really nice. And I also did the best I could to support them. In any case, Ann has left us. She's found a major career job. I don't know if that's that's correct English, career job. But in any case, she found a great career, and she's working on that. And I hope she will continue to progress in her life. She's got a major university degree, and I hope she will expand upon that and continue. But she's gone now. It was pretty rough on everybody here. I'm speaking now off script. I put this script together. It takes me time. I think I'm a better script creator than I am a script announcer or speaker. But in any case, I'm just speaking casually now. Ann's great. She's gonna do wonderful in life. I have no doubt she's gonna be a major player in a few years. R is still here. She will find her niche in life. Like I said, I'll stop saying this, but I'm 80, and I actually believe, maybe it's just an old man thing, I actually believe in fate. And I know I've read in psychology terminology, it's the weak person's way of saying whatever happened, it wasn't their fault. But I've seen so many things happen in life. It's almost like you could, if you wanted something, a widget, say widget X. If you wanted widget X, you want it the worst way, you could throw $1 million at it. If it wasn't meant to be, you're not going to have that item. And I actually believe that things happen in life for a reason. And I'm not trying to postulate that I have any more knowledge of why life is as it is or life is as it is. I don't know that. But it seems, from my perspective, that life is a learning experience. And hopefully most of us have learned a lot of things in life, and maybe that's what we carry forward into the next plane of existence, if you wish. Maybe that's why we're here, to learn, to grow, to become better people. I'm not sure, but I do believe in fate. It just, so many things happen, really, really strange. In any case, thank you all for thank you all for sticking with me on this topic. And we miss you like crazy, or we will miss you when you leave. I actually hope you find something here, a major career in town, and able to stay, but that is entirely up to you. And I guess that's it for now. I'll play a soundtrack on the way out, and thanks everybody. Have a good week.
Lights, they're shining so bright. We're gonna dance through the night. Hands up, feeling the heat. Move your body to the beat. Step by step, we start to glide. In this moment, we can't hide. Music's pumping and hearts are racing. Let's keep this party never ending. We're dancing in the stars tonight, higher than the moon. Taking flight, feel the rhythm, feel the vibe. Together we can touch the sky. We're dancing in the stars tonight, higher than the moon. Taking flight, feel the rhythm, feel the vibe. Together we can touch the sky. Lights, they're shining so bright. We're gonna dance through the night. Hands up, feeling the heat. Move your body to the beat. Step by step, we start to glide. In this moment, we can't hide. Music's pumping and hearts are racing. Let's keep this party never ending. We're dancing in the sun.